Down at the lakeside in the thin drifting mist, a mysterious formation disk had already taken shape, its silver lines traced in fine powder across the ground, and above it, a second set of murderous patterns lay overlaid on the first. These were two distinct workings. The sea-turning formation meant to drain the lake dry, and the lightning strangulation formation meant to slaughter whatever guarded the treasure. Since a place where a heaven-defying treasure is born almost always comes with a guardian beast. Now that the setup was finished, all 8 formation masters stood pale and hollowed out, their spiritual power nearly spent, yet their eyes still shimmered with a greed they could not hide. Their leader, Brother Jang, ran one last check across the working before he turned a stern look on Yu Myung, who had been bowing and scraping at the edge of the group. He asked one final time whether Yu Myung was certain the beast guarding the spirit-nurturing crystal was only a first-grade peak beast. Yu Myung patted his own chest, swearing on his life it was true, insisting his treasure-seeking compass had never read higher than first-grade peak, at the very most brushing the threshold of the second grade. Brother Jang still frowned, a small stubborn unease sitting in his chest that he could not name, but the others beside him had long since been blinded by the crystal, and none of them wanted to hear about caution now. One told Brother Jang to stop dithering when the man had staked his life on it. Another scoffed that even a second-grade early-stage beast meant nothing, not with all of them together and the kill formation already laid down. A third pointed out that the strongest thing a low-level realm could hold was a second-grade mid-stage beast, so what was there to fear? And the last urged them to hurry before somebody else stumbled onto the treasure. Under all that pressing, the sliver of doubt in Brother Jang thinned. Even a second-grade early-stage guardian meant nothing, he told himself. Not with 8 formation masters here, 3 of them first-grade late-stage, and a kill formation already primed. Fortune favors the bold. He stopped hesitating and called out in a low voice for everyone to prepare to activate the formation. Yu Myung cheered them on, pumping his fists like the world's most loyal follower, telling the big brothers to go and get it, while a thread of icy mockery flickered deep inside those honest-looking eyes. His feet, unnoticed by anyone, had already drifted a dozen meters back, opening an absolutely safe distance. A pack of idiots blinded by their own greed, he sneered inwardly, slipping the plain bronze compass back into his sleeve. Ancestral, was it? True enough, but it was no ordinary trinket. It was a genuine Earth-grade low-tier magical treasure, the heavenly mystery dragon-seeking compass, an item so far above this place that even 9th-grade powerhouses in the provincial capital of Dunan City would turn green with envy at the sight of it. And he, Yu Myung, was no ordinary student either. He came from the Jin family, a martial clan that had once shaken this whole province, keeping king-level experts at its gates in its glory days, until a cataclysmic feud dragged it down and every one of its powerhouses died in a single night. All that glory ground to dust. A loyal clan uncle had fought to the death to carry him out, and he had fled and fled, bearing his own name until he reached this remote little city of Gang City. He had martial talent far beyond ordinary men and had never dared show a threat of it, forced to bind his strength down to first-grade mid-stage and live like garbage, all because he was afraid the old enemies would find him. An enemy now a thriving clan in Sumyong province that could crush him with a flick of a finger. He had endured too long, sick to death of skulking in the gutters like a rat, and this was perhaps the only chance he would ever get to change his fate. The spirit-nurturing crystal. When the compass needle had swung and locked onto it, even Yu Myung had been stunned, because by the textbooks this was a heaven-grade wonder that should only ever be born inside a calamity-level secret realm. Why it had surfaced in a low-level realm he did not know and did not care. Once it was his towering martial talent joined to his heaven-defying spiritual power gift would show a potential violent enough to shock the world, and the top academies of the Korean Federation would scramble to protect him. Just look at Hyun, he thought bitterly. A vase with mediocre talent who got the city lord's mansion to guard her only because she lucked into a contract with a clever Mosquito. Once he had the crystal, the value he displayed would be 1,000 times hers. So these formation masters all had to die today, because only if every one of them was silenced could he refine the treasure in peace. Just then the sea-turning formation roared fully to life. A curtain of silver light shot into the sky and draped itself over the entire lake, and the water seemed to be gripped by a vast invisible hand, churning into a massive tornado that the formation kept siphoning off and flinging into the distance, the level dropping fast enough to watch with the naked eye. Further off, behind a cluster of rocks, I was enjoying the show. These formation masters had some real flair. I marveled from where I lay on Hyun's shoulder, taking in the whole full special effects spectacle. Hyun kept her face perfectly calm, not a ripple in those cold eyes, since to her a working at this level was a child scribbling in the dirt. In her past life, though never a specialist in formations, she could have thrown up a 9th-grade grand formation on a whim. Still, for first-grade masters, raising a working this powerful was already genius among their peers, and the only pity was that their brains were the weak part, since they were being used as pawns and did not even know it. She narrowed her eyes and murmured that the beast at the lake bottom ought to be waking up now. Soon, I told her through the contract, rubbing my forelegs together and getting more worked up by the second. Just as the lake bottomed out, a roar packed with fury exploded from the depths, and a huge black shadow shot out of the muddy water. It was a giant turtle the size of a small truck, its body sheathed in a shell as black as ink jade, its limbs thick as stone pillars. A second-grade mid-stage ink jade black turtle, and in those murky eyes a boiling rage locked onto the little bugs on the shore who had shattered its sweet sleep. The instant Brother Jang felt that aura, the blood drained from his face and he cursed out loud, blurting that it was second-grade mid-stage and howling every insult he had at Yu Myung. The other masters glared daggers across the shore, and Yu Myung only put on a face more shocked and innocent than any of theirs, protesting that the compass had read first-grade peak, so the thing must have hidden its strength. His performance nearly made them cough up blood, but there was no time for revenge. The furious turtle had already opened its maw, and a jet-black column of water thick as a barrel came blasting at them like a cannon, and Brother Jang tore his throat raw, screaming for them to activate the kill formation. They wrung out the last drops of spiritual power they had and poured it into the lightning strangulation formation. Lightning flared blinding, countless thick electric snakes lancing out and weaving into an enormous net of thunder that strangled down toward the black water column, the two energies colliding with a deafening roar. The battle ran a full 10 minutes, and in the end, under the 8 masters' reckless output, that thick-hided turtle was finally worn down and blasted into charcoal. Their side had paid dearly, though, every one of them drained bone dry and collapsing to the ground with faces white as paper, without even the strength to stand, and yet those pale faces were lit with the giddy joy of people who had survived a disaster. They laughed that they had won, crowed that the crystal was theirs, and began dragging themselves up to dig for the treasure, when a lazy, playful voice drifted over. Yu Myung told them, syrupy, that the big brothers had worked so hard. Everyone looked up. They saw him walking toward them step by step, the honest simplicity wiped clean off his face, replaced by a cruelty like a cat toying with a mouse. He thanked them for laboring on his behalf, then said he regretted to inform them there would be no wages. Brother Jang and the others sat stunned as the truth crept in. They had been played, used from the start, the old game of the mantis stalking the cicada with the oriole waiting behind. Brother Jang jabbed a finger at him, cursing that he dared to plot against them. Another master, fury in his eyes but a sneer on his lips, told Yu Myung not to make him laugh. He was nothing but trash first-grade mid-stage, and the miniature defensive formation woven around him was not something garbage could break. So let him try taking a step closer. The rest sneered along, no fear in their eyes, only the contempt you would show a clown. Since his formation masters, none of them came from simple stock, and everyone carried a life-saving trump card. Was that so? Yu Myung asked, stopping right in front of them, the smile turning downright playful. And what, he added softly, if he were not first-grade mid-stage at all? The moment the words left him, a raw tide of blood chi erupted out of him, the realm he had crushed down for years rising steadily like a tiger snapping free of its chains. Climbing from first-grade late stage on up to first-grade peak, that towering aura pressed down on every heart like a mountain, the air freezing, the gravel and grass clippings on the ground rattling from the sheer pressure. Brother Jang and all 8 masters stared, dumbstruck, every scrap of their scorn shattered by that terrifying weight. First-grade peak, Brother Jang whispered, lips trembling, and then, hollow with dread, asked whether the man had been hiding his strength this whole time. Their eyes nearly split as they finally understood that from the moment Yu Myung walked up to them, their fates had been sealed. The formations they were proud of, the battle they had fought with their own lives, every bit of it had been a scene in this man's script. And the oriole behind was in truth the cicada all along. Yu Myung threw back his head and laughed, savage and unrestrained, crying that finally he no longer had to pretend, every humiliation and resentment of the years pouring out of him at once. His cold gaze swept the ash-faced masters, and he raised a hand to send them on their way. But just then a clear, cold woman's voice cut in from behind the rocks, remarking that the acting had been quite good and the trump cards quite plentiful, that she truly had underestimated him. The smile froze on Yu Myung's face and he spun around. They saw Hyun stroll out from behind the rocks with her strange mosquito, a hint of surprise on her lovely face, and the masters' heads buzzed, completely thrown. If they were the mantis and Yu Myung the oriole, then what was this woman who had appeared out of nowhere? And could it be they were sitting at the very bottom of the food chain? Once Yu Myung got a clear look, he stalled out too. It was Hyun, the school beauty who had thrown the whole school into an uproar during the campus-wide test 3 days back. Why would she be here? He remembered her strength perfectly. A first-grade late-stage martial artist contracted to a first-grade early-stage mutated mosquito. So with so little to her name, how did she dare speak to him in that tone and lurk in the shadows playing the oriole exactly as he had? Did she have hidden trump cards too, or was she, as the rumors whispered, simply a lunatic with a broken head who had no grasp of what she stood before? He had endured years of humiliation by relying on a caution far beyond ordinary men, and until he understood an opponent he would never move rashly. But just as he forced himself calm, a thought struck him like lightning and made his very soul shudder. His strength was exposed. His face went white, cold sweat soaking his back. Because to wipe out those masters he had let his blood chi loose without reservation, breaking clean through to first grade peak. That was top tier in a small city high school like Gang City, but across Suimyeong province, let alone the whole Korean Federation, it was nothing, and while it fell short of drawing the Federation's high leaders, it was more than enough to catch the various powers inside the province, which meant a very high chance his old enemies would notice him. If he walked out like this, his identity would be blown wide open, all his years of forbearance for nothing, and he would die. His gaze snapped to the dried-up lake bed, the fear hardening fast into determination and madness, the spirit-nurturing crystal. Only by seizing it, pushing his talent up another level, and showing potential enough to shake the entire Federation could he earn the highest protection and actually survive. It was no longer merely a chance to change his fate, but his single road out alive. With the last of his hesitation gone, Yumyeong stared hard at Hyun and told her, slow and hoarse, that she really had picked a bad time to arrive. That things she should not see were best left unseen, or else she would die. Hyun acted as if she had not caught a word, not even sparing him a second glance, since to her this mantis turned Oriole, however deep his cards, was just a slightly more energetic ant. What held her attention was the pure sacred energy now welling up out of the lake bed, the aura of the spirit-nurturing crystal, maddeningly seductive and impossible to hide, sure to draw the realm's other beasts and other examinees once it spread, so she had to get her hands on it fast. She made her decision in a heartbeat, turned her head, let her gaze fall on me riding her shoulder, and asked in a flat, conversational tone whether I could handle this place while she went and fetched the item. The words carried plainly to everyone present. Yumyeong's brain locked up, Brother Jang and the others locked up, the whole short-circuiting on that one sentence. She was leaving it to the Mosquito. Did she even hear what she was saying? Not a problem, boss. I told her at once. Don't worry about it. It was just a division of labor, the kind of small chore that took only a mouth. And a first-grade peak martial artist against me right now was frankly an easy win. Hyun nodded, satisfied, and without lingering, she turned and walked toward the center of the drained lake bed, slow and unbothered as if strolling across her own back garden, paying no mind to the martial artist behind her, or the masters heaped on the ground. She trusted me. After a few days side by side, she could sense my aura had also reached the ceiling of first-grade peak, a single step from breaking through, and paired with my endless bag of bizarre abilities, handling a man who had only just tipped his hand was more than I needed. On the shore, Yumyeong and the masters gaped at her back. Every one of them crashed, faces stamped with baffled shock. She really just left, dropping her first-grade early-stage Mosquito on a first-grade peak martial artist, and 8 masters who, drained or not, still had their trump cards. Yumyeong stared at her retreating figure, then at me hovering in the air, his caution-type face slowly twisting, until at last he laughed out of pure disbelief. The woman really was a complete lunatic, exactly as the rumors said, and he had simply overthought a madwoman. He let out a long breath, all his tension bleeding away, and looked at me with a flicker of pity, thinking what a shame it was that a creature with this much intelligence, and this unique a form, a variant worthy of the history books, had gone and followed the wrong master. On the ground, the masters rode their own roller coaster. A moment ago, Hyun's arrival had lit a thin flame of hope, since they had taken this school beauty for the true hunter behind the mantis, and now she had dumped a Mosquito on the problem and doused that flame with ice water. So surely it was over. Yumyeong's cold gaze locked onto me, and he told the little thing that it was truly pitiable, that it was a shame supreme intelligence like mine had gotten itself contracted to a lunatic, perhaps simply fate. Then he stopped hesitating, stomped down, blew the ground apart under his feet, and shot at me like a cannonball, his first-grade peak blood chi erupting without restraint, a thick coat of earthy yellow light condensing over his fist and tearing a piercing sonic boom from the air. Facing that thunderous strike, I did not dodge at all. I just gave my pair of wings, streaming with dark red flame light, a leisurely little flap. Explosive flame flying feather, level 3. Over a dozen flame feather blades wrapped in pale flame power sprayed out of my wings like a shotgun blast, ripping toward him at several times the speed of a bullet, and he barely had time to cross his arms and slam every drop of blood chi into them before the whole dozen landed at once. A string of dense explosions tore out, scorching light and violent shockwaves swallowing him whole, a shrill scream coming from the fire. His body flew back over 10 meters as though a speeding truck had hit him head-on, crashing down and rolling several times before it stopped, clothes shredded and charred black, the whole man a smoking wretch. For a moment the world went silent. The masters gaped with eyes bulging half out of their skulls, because that first-grade peak Yu Myung had been one-shotted by a mosquito. Their heads whipped around to stare at me, drifting there and lazily fanning my wings. An aura even thicker and more suffocating than the one Yu Myung had released, rolling off my tiny body. First-grade peak, Brother Jang cried, voice shaking with disbelief. 3 days ago at the school test it had been first-grade early stage, and in 3 days it had climbed all the way to first-grade peak. That was not riding a rocket. That was outright cheating. Yu Myung dragged himself up, spitting out a mouthful of charred-smelling blood and staring at me like he had seen a ghost, muttering that it was impossible, demanding to know whether I too had been hiding my strength. His shock curdled fast into rage. He had endured for years, waited so long to detonate his limit, and a mosquito had gravely wounded him in a single move. Worse, a terrifying realization landed on him, that this mosquito might actually be able to stop him, which meant the crystal might really be snatched clean out of his hands. He roared his unwillingness, bloodshot eyes sliding into full madness, snarling that he did not care what kind of monster I was. Today I had to die. The blood chi in him erupted again, more violent than before, his frame swelling a size larger and strange patterns surfacing across his skin. The clear mark of a secret technique forced open to stimulate his potential. He called out the thick earth mountain suppressing punch and charged, its mountain-heavy intent cracking the sandy ground beneath his feet before the fist even arrived. One of the masters cried out in fresh alarm that it was a profound tier boxing technique, his family owning an extensive library and himself having leafed through the province's famous manuals. That punch intent, that earthy yellow blood chi light was the Jin family's thick earth mountain suppressing punch from years past, and he demanded to know who this man was. The Sumyung Jin family, another echoed, hadn't they perished long ago? And a third choked out that Yu Myung could not possibly be a surviving remnant. Only now did they grasp that his secrets ran far deeper than they had imagined, for a punch of that power could easily kill an ordinary second-grade early-stage beast, and they wondered whether even the mosquito could block it. Facing that earth-shattering blow, the blood-red mosquito that was me simply, slowly, unhurriedly, flew a few meters higher. Yu Myung's fist, strong enough to shatter a stone monument, whistled past my 6 legs and slammed into empty air, plowing a trench several meters long into the sand. And then there was no and then. Yu Myung froze mid-swing, still holding the pose. The masters frozen with him, a deathly silence rolling back over the world as everyone stared up at the mosquito looking down on a lot of them. Slowly, with enormous effort, Yu Myung raised his head to the mosquito that was so close and yet as far off as the horizon, and his mind went blank. It could fly. As a first-grade martial artist, he could not step on the air, could not reach me, and out of him, ground between his teeth, came a single curse packed with endless humiliation. Someone's getting desperate, I noted cheerfully, having an absolute blast up there. This was the great weakness of martial artists, who before the 5th grade could not manage even a brief hop through the air and had basically no long-range attacks. So against a flying enemy, all they could do was stare. Come down and fight if you have the guts, Yu Myung bellowed, sprinting skyward like a loaded spring and hurling that heavy intent fist at me again. Useless. I just drifted up another few meters, careless as ever, and he crashed back to earth and smashed a shallow crater into the ground, chest heaving, bloodshot eyes fixed on the mosquito circling above, the thought pounding through him that he simply could not touch it. His mind boiled over, the caution he had guarded for years evaporating in a single beat. If he could not hit me, he decided then he would go hit my master. She was only a beast tamer, and without her contract beast at her side, even a first-grade late-stage martial artist would never block his desperate strike, and killing her would deal her blood contract beast a heavy blow, even if it did not die, dropping the initiative back into his hands. He roared like a beast, turned his back on me, and charged madly toward the lake bed. As if I would let him have his way, one flap of my wings sent another dozen explosive flame-flying feather blades streaming out in a dense net of fire, sealing his path. This time, the crazed Yu Myung did not dodge at all, eating several explosions dead-on and letting the searing shockwaves rip his skin open, still bulling forward under the effect of his potential stimulating technique. Such a hard head, I thought, genuinely a little surprised. The guy had gone all the way insane. But it did not matter, because with a single thought I opened the molten insect hive, a dark red spatial rift, as if it opened onto some purgatory plane, tore into being out of thin air right in front of him, and outpoured an endless crimson swarm, flies and cockroaches and moths all sheathed in magma-like patterns, destructive flame burning in their compound eyes, their bodies packed with unstable, about to detonate pale flame power. Every last one was a self-exploding flame insect. Yu Myung's charge jerked to a dead stop as he stared in raw horror at the sea of self-detonating insects blotting out the sky, and before he could fall back, the swarm swallowed him whole. In an instant, it was as if 1,000 miniature bombs went off at once, a chain torrent of deafening blasts, flame and shockwave shredding a layer off the ground for dozens of meters around. The masters slumped nearby, gawked like at a natural disaster come to earth, brains locked solid, unable to string together a sentence. It had summoned an army, they realized, an army of self-detonating insects. They had seen beasts called companions, 3 to 5 weak helpers at most, but this mosquito had summoned hundreds, thousands, an endless sky swallow and tide. This was no contract beast. This was a mobile, flying, tireless war fortress, and they had no idea what monster they had provoked today. The aftershocks faded, leaving only a huge scorched crater, and Yu Myung lay at its center with not one patch of intact skin left, limbs twisted, already at death's door. He forced his eyes open, looked at the dispersed swarm and the unharmed mosquito, and endless despair welled up. He had lost completely, without a shred of suspense, the scheming he took such pride in and the strength he had buried for years exposed as a ridiculous, overreaching joke, and he began to laugh, broken and hysterical, tears running down. And just then Hyun came walking out of the dried lake bed, a fist-sized crystal cupped in her hand, transparent through and through, countless stars swirling inside as they were born and died. The spirit-nurturing crystal. A wave of warm, pure energy poured off it, the kind that soothed the mind just by being near. Yet there was no joy on Hyun's face. Instead, she knit her brows, troubled, because the crystal's aura was too strong to hide. Her beast-taming bag was built to store living creatures, dead ones too at a pinch, but not a heavenly treasure like this, and she could not simply carry it bare in her hand the whole way back, and pull every monster and examinee in the realm down on her head. While she worried, I flew over with something clutched in my legs, an unremarkable hide pouch. It was a spatial storage bag, the only worthwhile loot on the half-dead Yu Myung, so I dropped it at her feet and signaled her to use it. She looked at the bag, then at me, a faint imperceptible gleam of approval crossing her cold eyes. Allowing that as a companion, this guy was barely qualified. She tucked the crystal inside, and the sacred aura was cut off at once. With the loot put away, she turned her cold gaze on Yu Myung lying broken in the pit, all power to resist gone. She had never held a scrap of pity for someone who wanted her dead. She raised a hand, and a sharp blade of palm wind whistled out and ended his life, clean and decisive. Then her eyes drifted to the master sprawled ashen on the ground, and feeling that icy gaze, their hearts dropped straight to the bottom. It was over. They had witnessed everything and learned the terrifying strength of the mosquito, so there was no way they would not be silenced, and a bone-deep despair fell over them. Proud sons of heaven raging inwardly at dying so senselessly in this god-forsaken place. Yet just as they closed their eyes to meet death, Hyun's cold voice came again, and the words stunned them. She would give them a chance to live. "Hand over whatever valuable items they carried," she said flatly, but with an authority that brooked no argument, "and by their own lives." Decisive as she was, she never slaughtered the innocent. These men had never provoked her and posed no future threat. And as for the crystal's secret, she would absorb it soon and have nothing left to hide once outside. Brother Jang and the others snapped their eyes open in astonishment, because she was not killing them, but asking for ransom, actually meaning to let them go. And after the shock came a wild, disaster-surviving joy. Wealth was an outside thing, gone today and earned again tomorrow, but a lost life was the end of everything. Brother Jang reacted first, ignoring his wretched state as he yanked a pile of items out of his storage ring, calling her big boss and offering all his savings, a few bottles of second-grade chi recovery pills, and a third-grade defensive talisman, begging her to spare him. The rest woke as if from a dream and followed suit, heaping their most valuable treasures before her with pleading smiles, none of them daring to hold anything back in the face of absolute strength. Hyun's gaze swept the scattered pills and talismans, and finally settled on a few bottles of blue pills giving off a rich medicinal fragrance. Meridian, protecting pills, and second-grade ones, exactly what she needed most, because cultivating the 10,000 beasts furnace art put a brutal load on the meridians, and with these she could push all the way to second-grade peak without a single worry. Satisfied, she waved a hand to sweep everything into Yu Myung's storage bag, then waved the men off. Brother Jang and the 8 of them scrambled up like prisoners granted amnesty, and hurried away exchanging looks heavy with relief and a tangled complexity. This Hyun was decisive in killing yet clear about her debts and grudges, killing Yu Myung because he wanted her dead, sparing them because they had never shown hostility, and had in a sense done her a favor by draining the lake. A disposition that did not read like a high schooler at all. One master started to say something with lingering fear, and Brother Jang cut him off low and sharp, ordering that everything today rot in their stomachs, warning that if anyone breathed a word outside he would not blame him for forgetting their old classmate friendship. He knew someone like Hyun was an existence they could not afford to provoke, and buying their lives back with money was already a colossal stroke of luck. Everyone shivered and nodded. Meanwhile, I could not have cared less about that little tip. While Hyun and the masters were trading, I had already flapped over to land beside the charcoaled corpse of the ink-jade black turtle. Most of the big guy had been blasted into ruin by the lightning, but a few parts were still relatively intact and giving off rich blood chi, and I was not picky in the least. I drove my crimson molten heart demon sting straight into a stretch of reasonably whole turtle leg meat, and a huge pure surge of blood chi came flooding in. The system chimed that I had absorbed 17.8 blood chi, bringing my total to 483, that the blood was digesting and would take about 20 minutes, and that once done I would net 3.5 evolution points for a total of 72.4. Not bad at all, I thought. This mouthful nearly catching up to that cub with the high-level bloodline I had once drained, since a second-grade mid-stage monster, even with only a low-level bloodline, put out a quality and quantity of blood chi no first-grade thing could match. My blood chi sat at 483 now, just 17 shy of the 500 mark, so once this batch finished I would take one more sip, and as long as I pulled in another 17 points, the 500 I needed for the 4th evolution would finally be gathered. The lakeside had gone completely quiet. Hayun silently counted through the life-buying money the masters had left, picking out the useful pieces, and it had to be said that no one who walked the Dao formations came from a plain background. 20 minutes later, the system finally sounded that digestion was complete, and I had gained 3.5 evolution points for a running total of 72.4. My spirits jumped, and I did not waste a second, aiming my hideous molten heart demon sting at the turtle meat and driving it in hard. One more bite and I could break through. Another surge of majestic blood chi poured in like a rushing river, and the system announced I had absorbed 18.9 for a total of 501.9, that my blood chi had crossed the 500 mark, that my rank had risen, and that I now stood at second grade early stage. This batch would digest in 20 minutes for an estimated 3.8 evolution points, pushing me towards 76.2. It was done. I felt as though a volcano had erupted inside me, my blood chi boiling in a single instant and washing through every limb, a power several times what I had before flooding every cell. The dark red patterns on my carapace brightening and scalding, each flap of my wings running hotter than ever. Only a dozen odd points, and yet my combat power had at least doubled, because breaking the blood chi threshold into a new realm was never as simple as bumping a number up. It was an all-around enhancement, top to bottom. This feels incredible, I crowed inwardly, and if I ran into a first-grade peak martial artist like Yu Miang now, one explosive flame-flying feather would erase him before he even reached for a secret technique. At the very moment I broke through, Hayun went stiff, her head snapping up and her cold eyes locking onto the mosquito not far off, filled with an unbelievable shock and an almost numb bewilderment, because this aura was second-grade early stage, which meant it had broken through yet again. Her brain felt like it had short-circuited. She, the reborn empress, had risked her life cultivating a forbidden evil art, and even leaning on all her past life experience, it had taken her a full week since rebirth to crawl from first-grade early stage to first-grade peak, on a normal technique that speed would have stunned the whole Korean Federation and earned the title of a peerless genius unseen in 1,000 years. And the mosquito did nothing but suck blood, sleep, and suck more blood, and its strength climbed like it was strapped to a rocket, roaring up until it even surpassed her. She could not help remembering the scene back home a week ago, the first time she had laid eyes on this mosquito. Back then, an ordinary white-striped mosquito with a blood chi of 1/100th of a point and only a few days of life left. The weakest bottom-tier creature in the world. Now it was a demonic beast at second-grade early stage that could crush a first-grade peak martial artist without breaking stride. All inside half a month. Just what kind of monster was this? The corner of her mouth twitched, her common sense pinned to the floor and ground to dust by this mosquito once again. She drew a deep breath, forced the storm in her chest down, and asked in a slightly hoarse voice whether I still wanted to suck blood, suggesting we leave, since it was time to find a place to refine the crystal. Such a big chunk, I protested. Wouldn't it be a waste not to finish it? Eyeing the turtle's remains that were still more than half whole. It was all pure blood chi and evolution points, so how about tucking it into the beast-taming bag to go? The instant the thought formed, I felt the bag at Hayun's waist give a small tremble, and through that faint bloodline connection, a childish thought thrummed across, brimming with longing. One of the lion cubs asking whether this was a buffet its mama had brought it. Who is your mama, I thought, and hold on, a bloodline connection between a mosquito and a lion. Is that even remotely logical? Hayun glanced at me, seeming to read my mind, and swept every remaining blood chi-bearing scrap into Yu Myung's storage bag. Good. I nodded. It was safe in there, since I had no intention of handing that little idiot who called everyone mama a free meal. Hayun rolled her eyes at a loss for what to do with either of us, then took me and slipped off toward the deepest, most desolate corner of the realm. It was a dead land of jagged rock, with almost no vegetation and no water, where beasts were rare and examinees basically never set foot, since the whole point of the exam was to kill beasts for points. She figured that in her past life this was likely where Yu Myong had refined the crystal. Soon we found a hidden cave. Haiyun set up a simple warning and concealment formation at the mouth, walked deep inside, and carefully lifted the crystal out of the storage bag. And the moment it appeared, the dim cave lit up with a soft, sacred starlight. Looking at its endless flowing brilliance, her cold eyes finally welled with an uncontrollable heat, and she could even see that the light was half substantial, wisps of it drifting around the crystal like flowing star sand, energy purified to the utter extreme. As long as she absorbed it, her spiritual power talent would take another qualitative leap. Her gift in her past life had been hailed as first across all the ages, but only along the path of beast taming. And if she wanted to branch into formations or become a spiritual mentalist, she could make some headway, yet stepping into the king realm would be like reaching for heaven, to say nothing of the unreachable emperor realm. But if her talent climbed further, maybe in this life she would not even need to wait for her blood chi to hit the 5th grade before abandoning the dead end that was the 10,000 Beasts furnace art, and perhaps she could master every branch of spiritual power at once. Formations, mentalism, and beast taming together. More than that, absorbing the crystal would surely break her spiritual power realm into the 2nd grade in one leap, and by then, her control over the mosquito would only be firmer. At the thought, her eyes drifted to me on her shoulder, a faintly smug curve tugging at her lips. So what if this guy's blood chi grew fast, and his strength was absurd? She told herself, on the level of spiritual power she was the eternal king, and as long as the blood contract held, I would never slip her control. But at that very moment she felt her shoulder go light. The mosquito had lifted off and settled directly onto the crystal in her hand, and under her instantly frozen blank stare, it leveled its crimson proboscis at the surface and took a light little sip. "What are you muttering about in there?" I asked. "If you're not going to absorb it, then I will." The next second, the half-materialized starlight swirling around the crystal seemed to find a drain and came pouring steadily into my mouthparts. The system reported ultra-high purity spiritual energy and began absorption, pinging gains in a frantic rolling stream. 25.5, 36.1, 55.8. One after another, a cool, immense energy washing along my mouthparts through every inch of my nerves. It tallied a total of 189.2 points of spiritual power absorbed, my running total now 220.8, and announced my spiritual power realm had broken clean through to 1st grade mid-stage, adding that the energy I had drawn in was extremely pure and gentle with no side effects. So once digestion finished, I could keep drinking. So fierce. Just one gentle mouthful, and my spiritual power went from having no realm at all, straight to 1st grade mid-stage, already level with the Empress. My mind felt clearer than it ever had. If the world before had looked like a blurry low-resolution feed, now it had leapt to razor-sharp ultra-high definition. Every mote of dust in the air, every fine line on the distant rock wall, even the faint cool fragrance rising off Haiyun beneath me, clean as the sky after snowfall, turned incredibly clear and three-dimensional, as though I could brush them with my very spirit. The speed of my thoughts reached an inconceivable level. Problems that once took ages now unfolding into several solutions at a single thought. A sense of seeing through everything worlds beyond the raw power that plain blood-sucking gave. The trouble was that all this energy left my head swollen and tight, like a balloon crammed full of water and pushed to the edge of bursting, and the system said it would take a full 2 hours to fully digest. Just as I figured, I gloated. If it has a physical form, it can be sucked. The logic holds. I had worried I might have to grind a crystal this hard into powder and use some method too crude to mention, and it turned out to be as simple as it got. Just stick the tube in. I cast a greedy glance at the still brilliant crystal below and felt my swollen head with a pang of regret, since such a fine thing deserved more mouthfuls, and a 2-hour digestion window was far too slow with the Empress certainly not waiting on me. Nearby, Haiyun had frozen solid, her cool eyes wide and round, her lashes trembling with shock, as her gaze flicked between the crystal, visibly dimmed a notch, and the mosquito perched on it. It could directly absorb a spirit-nurturing crystal. The crystal was the crystallization of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, its structure incredibly stable, and only a heaven-ranked technique like her Teihio contemplation art could safely refine it. Absorbing it by pure physical means was unheard of, and she could not fathom how a body withstood it. And the efficiency was ridiculous. With one understated sip, the light had dimmed a visible amount, and worse, its spiritual power had surged to 1st grade mid-stage in an instant, the very same as her own. She swept her spiritual power carefully across the mosquito, and her heart took a hammer blow because its total was actually higher than hers by a margin, and at that her composure collapsed. Being outstripped in blood vitality she could endure, since the side effects of the 10,000 Beasts furnace art were too severe to cultivate fast. And besides, as her natal spirit pet, the faster the mosquito grew, the more she gained. but spiritual power was the foundation she was proudest of, as the beast-taming empress across 2 lifetimes, the greatest reliance that had let her look down on all living things in her past life. So how could she tolerate being surpassed by a mosquito in her most treasured field? Most critical of all, if a contract beast's spiritual power climbed past its masters, it might devour that master. No, she thought, absolutely not, gritting her teeth and clamping the crystal tight. The crystal's energy was finite, so she had to draw out as much as she could before her digestion finished, not merely closing the gap but leaving the mosquito far behind. Hyun took a deep breath, cast off every last shred of hesitation, and sat cross-legged with a solemn face, pressing the crystal to her forehead and shutting her eyes, circulating the Taehyo contemplation art like a woman possessed, and drinking down the pure energy at an unprecedented speed. Perched on the crystal, I felt its energy suddenly hauled away by another overbearing pull, and I could only curl my lip. Stingy, I thought. Is it really necessary to race me for food this hard, just because my spiritual power edged out yours by a hair? Still, my head was genuinely swollen, like I had thrown back 3 pounds of rock gut liquor and I needed to digest first. Since I was idle anyway, why not go get some more blood vitality? The fullness in my spirit did not touch the hunger in my body, 2 entirely separate energy systems running side by side without interfering. With a thought, my spiritual power, now up at first grade mid-stage, acted like an invisible hand and slid into the storage bag I had taken off Yumyong, whose spiritual imprint had scattered the moment he died, leaving the bag ownerless and open to anyone whose spiritual power reached the first grade. I rummaged inside and soon fished out the pieces of the ink jade black turtle. Among them was a small section of charred head, and I weighed the blackened skull a long while. It looked revolting, so no, I could not bring myself to suck that. I dropped it back and picked out a relatively intact piece of turtle meat, plunging my mouthparts deep in. The system chimed that I had absorbed 19.5 blood chi for a total of 521.4, that the blood would digest in about 18 minutes for an estimated 4.1 evolution points. And then came the line I had been waiting for, that my accumulated evolution points had reached 80.3, that the conditions for the 4th evolution were met, and that I could begin at any time, a process taking 24 hours. I rubbed my 6 legs together, giddy. This trip into the Blackstone secret realm had paid out an epic jackpot. Not only had my spiritual power surged, the conditions for my 4th evolution were finally in place, and the moment I got back I could kick it off. I wondered what I would look like on the other side, whether I would grow bigger, sprout more handsome wings, or pick up a few extra pairs of sharp claws. And full of anticipation I lounged on the cool turtle shell, savoring the twin pleasure of spiritual power and blood vitality digesting side by side. A few hours later, at the exit of the Blackstone secret realm, the twisted spatial rift flickered, the assessment time nearly up and students emerging one after another. On the square, a temporary scoring station and medical point had gone up, teachers tallying scores with grim faces while directing medics to treat the wounded. The scoring method was simple: hand over proof of a kill, an iconic part like a claw, an eyeball, or a fang, and trade it for points. A first grade early stage beast was worth 1 point, first grade mid stage 5, first grade late stage 10, first grade peak 20, second grade mid stage beast a staggering 100. That last figure was basically theoretical, since in the entire history of Gang City's high school no candidate had ever killed a second grade mid stage beast, alone or in a team. For most candidates, even a 5-person squad counted itself lucky to bring down a few first-grade mid-stage beasts, and a first-grade late-stage beast was a challenge only the top student of each class could dream of facing. Just then, a clamor broke out, and everyone turned toward the exit. Lee Wolyo came striding out at the head of her team, chins high, the 5 of them blood-stained and battered, but unable to hide their pride. "Look," someone shouted, "it's Lee Wolyo, and her Phantom Sound Spirit Fox is first-grade peak, so this team could fight even a second-grade early-stage beast." She set a heavy backpack on the scoring table and asked the teacher to count the points, and demonic beast materials tangled with blood spilled out and piled up like a small mountain. The teacher's face ran from surprise to shock, and once he finished he announced it loudly. Lee Wolyo's team, 15 first-grade early stage, 8 mid-stage, 6 late stage, and on top of that a successful kill on a first-grade peak red-maned hyena, for a total team score of 135 points. The whole venue erupted like a pot come to a rolling boil, because the highest team out before them had barely scraped 48, and that red-maned hyena was one of the realm's top predators, savagely ferocious, and they had hunted it down. The teacher added that by the team's agreed distribution, Captain Lee Wolyo's contribution came to 60%, putting her individual score at 81 points, a figure that left everyone else eating dust since the previous highest individual score had been only 32. Listening to the mountain-shaking cries of amazement and envy, Lee Woyo said it was just good luck, though the slight upward tilt of her lips gave away the pride underneath. A result like that would have placed top 3 in any previous assessment, and Gang City's highest individual record stood at only 85, held by a senior, now a legendary figure at a top spirit martial university in Dunan City, with limitless prospects. So with 81, she sat right on the edge of that record. Top 3 was locked in, and the heavy stone in her chest finally dropped, because that had been her whole goal. Break into the top 3 and she would draw the eyes of first-rate universities. And paired with a steady showing in the joint examination, a spot was as good as sealed, a future earned step by hard-won step. And then, unbidden, Hyun's cold face rose in her mind. By leaning on a mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence, that girl had scooped up the privileges of the city lord's mansion and a guaranteed slot. But so what if her luck was good? A trace of pity crossed Lee Wolyo's eyes, since that school beauty's remaining days were destined to be those of a canary kept in a cage, a subject for others to study, her whole future already visible from here to its dead end. Up on the rostrum, Provincial Education Department Director Jang Song-yeop and City Lord Im Jin-um both gave Lee Wolyo an approving glance, but right after, Im Jin-um's brow drew tight and he looked toward the exit with worry, asking why Hyun still had not come out when the time was nearly up. By rights, the weaker student should have emerged long ago, since every extra minute in a beast-infested realm meant another notch of danger, and now most candidates below first-grade peak had trickled out with Hyun nowhere to be seen. A first-grade late-stage martial artist carrying a first-grade early-stage mosquito with basically zero combat power, lasting this long inside, was in itself not quite normal. Nothing must happen to this young lady, Im Jin-um fretted, and Jang Song-yeop's face was none too pleasant either, since the two knew better than anyone the sheer value Hyun and her mosquito now represented, and if something went wrong under their noses, they would shoulder a share of the blame. Over in a corner, Nang Yan watched their anxious faces and sneered to herself. Something had happened. Wasn't that only natural? To be sure, nothing slipped through. She had spent a fortune, not only bribing several candidates ranked in the top 20, but also buying off that aloof #1 spiritual mentalist, Jin Peng. A first-grade late-stage martial artist hauling a trash mosquito, surviving under such an inescapable net, was flat-out impossible. Nang Yan sneered inwardly and stayed, on the surface as cold and rippleless as a well. All she needed to do now was wait. Wait for the news of Hyun's death to be confirmed, and the suspicious gazes to swing her way. And then she would meet every investigation with the most innocent face, because there was no evidence anywhere that could point back to her. Just then the warped light gate flickered violently once more, and two figures walked out almost side by side. When people saw who they were, the square fell silent, then broke into another wave of noise. It was Zhou Chongqian and Zhou Gai, the #1 of the beast taming department and the #1 of the martial arts department, two who never crossed paths, and heads spun trying to work out why they had come out together. Someone guessed they had fought in the realm, and someone else disagreed, pointing out that for all their wounds, those injuries were clearly from battling beasts, not from tearing into each other, and wondered aloud whether the two had actually cooperated. The two heaviest favorites for first place and each other's greatest rivals, joining forces, stunned the crowd, and even Lee Wolyo looked over with her brows knit. Under everyone's eyes, the two walked to the scoring desk, and Zhou Chongqian spoke first, saying they had formed a temporary team and would count their points together and split evenly, tossing a spatial storage bag onto the desk. When the teacher saw what lay inside, his hands trembled, because along with a large amount of first-grade late-stage and first-grade peak material, there were 2 heads of second-grade early-stage beasts getting off powerful auras. He sucked in a sharp, cold breath, and with shaking hands it took him over a minute to finish counting before he looked up, staring at the two youths as if at monsters, and announced it. Zhou Chengcheng and Zhu Gei's team 8 first-grade late-stage kills, 3 first-grade peak, and 1 each of the second-grade early-stage demonic beasts, a black-armored earth dragon and a 3-eyed demonic ape, for a total team score of 240 points, and by their equal split, individual scores of 120 apiece. When that string of numbers cracked over the square like a thunderclap, the whole field went dead silent. Every student struck dumb, and Lee Wolyo, who had just been so pleased with her 81, felt her expression freeze. Then the venue detonated, the record broken, Gang City High School's all-time practical assessment mark utterly crushed, and someone gasped that the two of them together had actually killed 2 second-grade early-stage beasts, asking whether they were even human. Listening to the shock and worship washing over him, an indescribable pride rose in Zhou Chengcheng's heart. This was the treatment he deserved, the focus of 10,000 gazes. There was a reason he had teamed with Zhu Gai. Just before entering the realm, his family had sent word through special channels that the Provincial Education Department director would personally hand out a valuable reward for first place. Confident as he was, he had not dared claim first for certain since Zhu Gei's strength matched his own, So when the two happened to meet, he had proposed teaming up to push their scores to the ceiling, tie for first, and split the director's reward with the school's record-breaking rewards on top. A clean win for both. But just as Jo Chang-chun was bracing for the cheers, Ju-gae pulled something else out of his pocket with a blank face, the tail needle of a first-grade early-stage stingtail bee, and set it on the desk, saying flatly to please add it. The teacher instinctively asked whether the team had killed it together, and Ju-gae shook his head, tone still level, saying no, he had killed it on his own before they teamed up and had forgotten to mention it. The smug smile froze solid on Jo Chang-chun's face. The teacher's expression turned deeply strange, and he silently added 1 point after Ju-gae's name. Ju-gae, 121. Jo Chang-chun, 120. The tie for first had turned into Ju-gae standing alone at the top. On the square, the cheers cut off short, everyone looking at Ju-gae with strange eyes, because the move, while not against the rules, was just too underhanded. Jo Cheong-chan's face went as black as the bottom of a pot. He whipped around and ground the words out through his teeth, demanding to know whether Jo-gae was playing dirty, and Jo-gae only gave him a faint glance and said he had simply forgotten. And if Jo Chang-chan thought it unfair, he could forfeit the point. Jo Chang-chan nearly coughed up a mouthful of old blood. The man had said it in front of every teacher and student and now claimed he did not want it, purely to disgust him. Jo-gae ignored him and the strange looks alike. Character, face, in his view these were things only the weak cared about. The path of martial arts was one where if you did not advance you retreated, and seizing every resource that could make you stronger by any means was the only truth. Take first today and collect the double reward, and his strength would climb another level. And once he became a truly powerful expert, who would dare gossip about his character behind his back? Just like Hyun, he thought, so what if she had lucked into privileges? In the end, she lacked the power to match them, and she would only ever become a precious lab rat the Federation kept caged, stripped of freedom and future. Up on the rostrum, the leaders held mixed opinions about Ju-gae's stunt, but Jang Sung-yeop and Im Jin-nam no longer had the heart to care about such trifles. Seeing the time nearly out and Hyun still nowhere in sight, the two could not sit still, traded a look, blurred into motion, and drifted down from the rostrum dozens of meters up, walking straight for the exit. Lee Wolyo, Jo Chang-chun, and Ju-gae, catching sight of the two big shots coming down in person, all instinctively straightened, certain the top leaders were coming to praise them, since their 3 scores had left the whole field far behind and locked in the top 3. But the scene that followed turned their hearts cold. Jang Sung-yeop and Im Jin-nam walked straight past them, and the director asked in an extremely anxious tone whether any of the students had seen Hyun inside the realm. The pride on Lee Wolyo's face froze. Jo Chang-chun's went black. Even Jo-gae, whose heart was usually as still as water, frowned deeply and felt an intense discomfort. On what grounds? They had fought tooth and nail, shattered Gang City's historical record, and pulled off brilliant results, and it turned out that in the eyes of these top leaders they still could not measure up to a lucky pretty schoolbelle, only because she had contracted a mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence. Beyond a bit of research value, what use was that mosquito? Could it even fight? And Hyun herself was nothing more than a first-grade late-stage martial artist, so why should she draw such attention? The unwillingness and jealousy in Jo Chang-chan's heart nearly boiled over. He had worked this hard purely to prove himself, and here he still was not being noticed, so he released his contract beast, the azure-armored wolf, straight out of the beast taming bag. A low roar sounded, and a vigorous, majestic wolf appeared, a powerful aura far exceeding first-grade peak sweeping out at once, and the whole audience turned shocked eyes on it in unison. This was the aura of second-grade early stage. When had Jo Chang-chin's azure-armored wolf broken through? Feeling the stunned gazes, the frustration in his chest was swept away, and the pride flooded back onto his face, and he shot a deliberate, provoking glance at Jo-gae. Jo-gae's pupils shrank sharply, an expression of extreme astonishment crossing his face for the first time as he remembered that in the realm Jo Chang-chan had peeled off from the team alone for over half an hour on the pretext of searching for prey. So he had gone to help the wolf break through. Beside them, Lee Wolyo was shaken even harder, the last scrap of pride from her 81 draining away as she bit down on her lip, because whether in score or contract beast, she had already been left far behind. Second-grade early stage, Jang Sung-yeop and Im Jin-nam murmured, both taken aback, casting Jo Chang-chun a surprised glance for the first time. 18 years old and a contract beast at second-grade early stage, a talent that would rate as excellent even in the provincial capital of Dunan City. Not bad, Im Jin-nam allowed, saying he was very good, then pausing to remind him seriously that he must not fixate on his contract beast's strength while neglecting his own spiritual power, since once a beast's power ran far past its master's limit of control, the tragedy of the beast turning on the master became very likely. Jo Chang-chan had been waiting for exactly those words. He threw his chest out and assured the city lord that his spiritual power had also reached first-grade late stage, enough to easily control a third-grade realm contract beast. The news landed even more explosive than the last, everyone looking at him as if at a monster. Beast tamers actually chase spiritual power realms far less hard than spiritual mentalists and formation masters, because most beast spiritual power lags well behind their vitality realm. A beast whose vitality hits 2nd grade early stage might not even have 1st grade mid-stage spiritual power. So a beast tamer need only hold at 1st grade mid-stage to keep firm control. And Zhou Changcheng had pushed his to 1st grade late stage. The effort and resources that must have taken were staggering. 1st grade late stage spiritual power. Zhang Songyup marveled, saying that even in the beast-taming department of Dunnan First Yongmu High School, he could walk into the elite class, a genuine prospect for the Huaqiang Yongde tier, and he turned to Im Jinim to say the city lord should keep a closer eye on him going forward. The moment those words were out, Zhou Chengshun's heart finally settled. This was exactly the effect he had wanted. Proof to everyone that he was the undisputed strongest genius of Gang City's year, at the peak in assessment score, in contract beast realm, and in personal spiritual power alike. And Haiyan, aside from good luck, she was nothing. Just a trophy girl who could never take the stage. Just as Zhou Changchun was riding high, the light at the exit flashed again, and a cold, aloof figure slowly emerged, her expression calm, her steps composed, her combat suit clean but for a little dust, as if she had not gone through a brutal assessment at all but merely taken a walk in her own back garden. It was Haiyan. Seeing her safe and sound, City Lord Im Jinim and Zhang Songyop both let out a breath. Their anxiety finally set down, since if something had truly happened, both would have been in trouble. In the corner of the rostrum, the cold smile froze on Nang Yan's face, her eyes flying wide, fixed on that figure with disbelief. How was she still alive? What about Jin Peng? What about the assassins she had spent a fortune to buy? A 1st grade late-stage spiritual mentalist plus 7 or 8 elite examinees. An inescapable dragnet, and they could not even handle one 1st grade late-stage martial artist, and a trashy mosquito. A pack of trash, she seethed, every last one of them. On the other side, Zhou Changqin watched Haiyan with a playful look, finally willing to come out. Judging by how clean she looked, she had probably found a corner to hide in the second she entered and simply toughed it out, and he wanted to see how many points this trophy girl could scrape together. 20, maybe 30. Under everyone's gaze, Haiyan walked straight to the scoring table and calmly lifted 2 items out of her storage bag, setting them gently down, and everyone leaned in and stalled. It was a pitch-black giant neck of some kind, looking like it had been struck by lightning, and a sharp scorpion tail shimmering with a metallic sheen. That was it, just 2 items. After a full 8 hours in the realm, she had hunted only 2 demonic beasts, and the surrounding students traded glances, their expressions turning odd. Zhou Chengcheng nearly could not hold in his laughter. Surely she had not just killed 2 1st-grade early-stage beasts, would only come to 20. It could not possibly be 1st-grade peak beasts, since with her strength she would never have come back alive, and even 2 of those would only make 40 points. Li Wolio shook her head to herself as well, thinking that just as she had figured, a trophy girl was always only a trophy girl. Zhou Ge did not spare Haiyun even a glance, since whether this campus belle got 2 points, 10 or 40 made no difference to him. And Im Jinim, Zhang Songyop, and all the leaders did not care about the 2 items either. More precisely, they had never cared about her score from the start, since at most it would be 20 or 30 points. But behind the scoring table, the teacher in charge, after seeing those 2 items, felt the expression on his face slowly freeze. With trembling hands, he carefully picked up the piece of turtle flesh and leaned in to examine the scorpion tail, his face growing more astonished by the second. This, he stammered, was the neck of a 2nd-grade mid-stage demonic beast, the ink jade black turtle. And this scorpion stinger, it was from a 2nd-grade mid-stage demonic beast, the sand sea venomous scorpion. 200 points, 2 2nd-grade mid-stage demonic beasts, the scoring teacher repeated. And then the number came out of his mouth like something he could not quite believe himself. 200 points, and the whole square went dead silent. Candidates who had just staggered out of the secret realm, leaders lined up along the rostrum, all of them stared at the 2 demonic beast materials laid on the scoring table as if their eyes had failed. That scorched black lump was supposed to be the head of a 2nd-grade mid-stage ink jade black turtle, and that scorpion tail, still flickering with an eerie glow, was the sting of a 2nd-grade mid-stage sand sea venomous scorpion, and everyone present was silently asking themselves how any of it could be real. Zhou Changchun's smile froze on his face, and he flat-out refused to accept it, demanding the teacher check again because it simply could not be right. Beside him, Juge fared worse, his pupils shrinking to points in raw shock. A man who had not even lost his composure like this when he learned Zhou Changshan's contract beast had broken through to 2nd-grade early stage. Li Wolio pressed her hand tight over her mouth to keep from crying out. Every candidate there understood the cruel arithmetic of it, that the higher the grade, the wider the gulf between small stages grew, until it yawned like a canyon. The blood chi threshold for second grade early stage was 500 points, but second grade mid stage demanded a full 1,000, a jump larger than the whole climb from first grade early stage to first grade peak. Zhou Chengqian and Zhou Ge had joined forces and burned everything just to barely down 2 second grade early stage beasts, and even that had left them spent. Run into a second grade mid stage beast and neither would have found the nerve to raise a hand. They would only have fled and counted themselves lucky to breathe. The sole group that stood any chance against one was the Formation Masters, and even they needed 7 or 8 working in concert, draining every drop of spiritual power to wear one down. And it was worth only 100 points split 8 ways, almost nothing each, when they could have hunted a fistful of second grade early stage beasts for the same effort. So no candidate had ever bothered, the ordinary ones lacking the ability and the Formation Masters finding it a thankless waste. And now Hyun stood there with 2 of them on the table, and every mind in the square screamed the same question. By what right? Then the veteran scoring teacher noticed something and said it out loud, that there was a strong lingering fluctuation of formation energy clinging to the turtle meat, which meant this ink jade black turtle had almost certainly been killed by a formation. The words landed, and for a beat the whole place froze, and then understanding dawned across every face at once. Of course, in the entire examination, the only group that could threaten a second grade mid-stage beast was that batch of formation masters, and given enough time and materials to raise a proper killing formation, wearing one down was theoretically possible. Someone in the crowd voiced the most obvious guess, that the formation major had banded together, set up a formation, and fought to the death to bring down the ink jade black turtle, and only when they were drained and helpless had Hyun swooped in to snatch the spoils. The theory caught fire instantly, everyone nodding, insisting it was the only way to explain it. One voice sneering that of course she could not have killed a second grade mid-stage beast herself, she had simply picked up a corpse, her luck being freakish as always. A few grumbled that a girl this beautiful stooping to something so shameless was hard to stomach, while others waved it off as pure dumb fortune. Zhou Chengqian and Zhou Ge both let out the same slow breath, because that they could accept even if it still stung. The scoring teacher frowned, looked at Hyun, and asked seriously what exactly had happened, because the rule was clear: whoever turned in the spoils earned the points, but only if the actual killer raised no objection, and any dispute kicked the whole thing into a far messier procedure. Before Hyun could answer, he raised his voice and called for the formation major candidates to come forward. And soon Brother Jang and his 7 companions shuffled over with pale faces and trembling hearts, under the weight of every stare. He pointed at the turtle meat and asked in a heavy voice whether they had killed this ink jade black turtle. Brother Jang and the others exchanged a single glance and read the same naked terror in one another's eyes. Admit it? Not a chance. If they admitted it, this young lady would peel their skins off later. So Brother Jang shook his head hard enough to rattle and rushed to deny everything, insisting it absolutely was not them, that they could never have that kind of power, that student Hyun had killed it. Yes, she killed it. It had nothing to do with them at all. The scoring teacher stared. The surrounding students stared. What was going on with these formation masters? Faces bloodless. Why did the most arrogant people on the field, the ones who normally strolled around with their noses in the air, suddenly look this frightened? Hyun swept them a faint glance and asked mildly whether it truly was not them who had killed it, and Brother Jang jumped as though jabbed and instantly reversed himself, blurting that of course it was them. They killed it. Look at his memory failing him in his old age. He had nearly forgotten. Now everyone could plainly see it. These formation masters were genuinely bone-deep afraid of Hyun, and nobody could work out why. Zhou Chengqian's mouth twitched, feeling his intelligence personally insulted, and he told Brother Jang that if he was being threatened he should just blink. At that, Brother Jang and the rest went wide-eyed and held their eyes open by force, refusing to blink even once. What a bunch of geniuses. Hyun did not bother playing along with them any longer, and simply stated the truth, that the ink jade black turtle had indeed been killed by them, and she had only picked up the leftovers, though she doubted they would have any objection to who received the points. Brother Jang and his companions shook their heads while their eyeballs bulged, swearing they had no objection at all, that the capable should have it. The capable should have it. Hyun nodded, then pointed at the scorpion tail, and added that as for this sand-sea venomous scorpion, she had simply run into it on her way out of the secret realm and killed it in passing. In passing. The scoring teacher's brain stalled on the phrase, and the crowds did too, that single line nearly frying every processor in the square. Killed a second-grade mid-stage beast in passing, as if she were some second-grade peak martial artist. And voices broke out insisting that even a liar had to have some shame. Nobody bragged like that. I sat on her shoulder and enjoyed every second of it. Zhou Chongqian's mouth twitched again, laughing in helpless fury, and he challenged her to explain how she and that first-grade early-stage Mosquito of hers had just happened to kill a second-grade mid-stage monster, because he flatly did not believe it, and in his opinion, she had gotten lucky and stumbled onto 2 corpses in the secret realm. He had stopped caring about the score entirely. What did it matter if her number beat his? When it was luck, when his contract beast's realm and his spiritual power both left hers in the dust, and nobody could ride luck forever. The students around him nodded along, feeling the Vase School beauty's fortune had grown genuinely obscene, that it was already too much to contract a Mosquito with heaven-defying intelligence, and now she was seizing first place off luck alone, and their jealousy nearly turned them red. But Zhuge Li Wolyo, City Lord Im Jinim, Zhang Songyop, and a cluster of leaders all frowned, sensing it was not that simple, because if it were only luck, why did those arrogant formation masters shake in their boots around her? Haiyun glanced at Zhou Chongqian, the corner of her mouth curving into a barely visible arc, and agreed that yes, her luck was indeed very good. She paused, her gaze sweeping the formation masters who were still trembling, and said that she had not merely found a second-grade mid-stage corpse, she had also been fortunate enough to snatch a spirit-nurturing crystal from these gentlemen. The formation masters looked ready to weep. Great Aunt, why keep grinding salt into the wound? The surrounding examinees mostly blinked in confusion, murmuring that they had never heard of a spirit-nurturing crystal, asking whether it was some heaven-defying treasure. The ordinary ones had no idea, but Zhou Chongqian, Li Wolyo, and Zhu Ge, the 3 top students from extraordinary backgrounds, changed color the instant the words left her mouth, wondering whether she was spouting nonsense, because how could a thing like that surface in a primary secret realm? Up on the rostrum, a middle-aged man in a white robe, faint light drifting between his brows, shot to his feet and exclaimed the name aloud. He fixed his eyes on Haiyun and swept her with his massive spiritual power, without the slightest reserve. And a heartbeat later, his face lit with wild excitement as he slapped his thigh and declared that it truly was the aura of a spirit-nurturing crystal. That no wonder he had sensed an extraordinarily pure spiritual power coming off her, when he had assumed it was an illusion. This man was the vice president of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, a 7th-grade spiritual mentalist, and his words sent the leaders on the rostrum reeling. They asked whether there was truly a spirit-nurturing crystal here, someone half shouting in disbelief that it was a heaven-tier supreme treasure born only in calamity-level secret realms, another insisting such a thing could never appear in a fresh little secret realm like this. Zhang Songyop's expression shifted, and he asked President Wang whether he was certain, and President Wang said it with total conviction that his perception could not be wrong. Noticing the confusion in many eyes around him, he explained offhandedly for those who did not cultivate spiritual power. The spirit-nurturing crystal, he told them, was a supreme treasure capable of rebirthing a spiritual-type cultivator, not only vastly raising spiritual power, but, more crucially, cleansing the spiritual origin itself and lifting a person's spiritual talent ceiling. One such crystal, he said, was enough to forge a future king-level powerhouse, and divine objects like it usually had only the faintest chance of forming in the depths of calamity-level secret realms. The whole square sucked in its breath at once, leaders and students alike, hard enough to warm the planet a degree. Forge a king-level powerhouse, a being that guarded a whole province, that looked down upon all living things and stood among them like a god, when the entire Suimyong province held only a handful of them on the surface, and a small crystal could grant such heaven-defying power. The leaders could no longer sit still, whispering among themselves, their eyes on Haiyun brimming with shock, greed, and fanatic hunger. President Wang could not hold himself back, and was the first on his feet, telling her with heavy gravity that a supreme treasure like the spirit-nurturing crystal was a national strategic resource, absolutely not something an ordinary student could possess. He advised her, for the sake of the Federation, and to spare herself the disaster that possessing such a treasure would invite, to hand it over of her own accord, promising that the Spiritual Mentalist Association, and indeed the whole Federation, would never treat her unfairly. The principal and the dean beside him traded a look, grasped the play at once, and stood to echo him, agreeing that an innocent man could still be condemned by the treasure he carried, that a first-grade martial artist simply could not protect a supreme treasure, and surrendering it was the wisest, most correct choice. Other department leaders joined the chorus, their voices thick with high-sounding moral pressure dressed up as concern. Zhang Songyop and City Lord Im Jinim said nothing, only shaking their heads inwardly, thinking the girl was still a student after all, a bit too naive. A treasure of this caliber, once spoken of in public, could no longer belong to any one person, and what followed would be mere theater, letting her volunteer it, handing her a certificate of honor and a token bonus. A pity to waste so vast an opportunity. Zhou Chengcheng, Zhou Gai, and Li Wolyo looked at Haiyun the way one looks at an idiot, marveling that she had obtained such a treasure, and instead of hiding it, dared to announce it in the open, which if it was not pure stupidity was hard to name. Yet facing every eye and every pressure, Hyun's face stayed calm as an old well without a ripple. She spoke plainly, her voice carrying clear across the whole venue, telling the leaders she was sorry, but the spirit-nurturing crystal had already been refined and absorbed by her. The instant her voice fell, a spiritual power far stronger, far purer, far more majestic than Jo Chungcheon's earlier surge erupted from her body and swept out in every direction like an invisible tide. Second grade mid-stage. In the peak of it, one step from second grade late stage, a realm of spiritual power that every peer she had could only crane their necks to look up at. The whole venue crashed into dead silence a second time. The righteous expressions on the principal and the dean froze solid, and the leaders who had been pressing and persuading opened their mouths and found not a word left in them. The awkward silence held for a full 10 seconds. The first to react was President Wang, the very man who moments earlier had loomed so grandly while forcing her to surrender the treasure. His face cycled through several expressions at a speed the eye could follow, and then he slapped his thigh and boomed with praise, calling it wonderful, well absorbed, declaring that heroes emerged from the young, that student Hyun's courage and decisiveness were extraordinary, her path to the king level now assured, that Suimyeong province had bred itself a dragon. The examinees below could only gape. The principal caught up an instant later and flipped his tune with a face full of excitement, agreeing that to stake one's life for finding a heaven-tier treasure on the spot took a courage that shamed them all. In seconds, the whole rostrum performed a flawless round of stage. I could only sit there thinking, 666. When exactly did we transmigrate to an opera stage? Off to the side, Jo Changcheon had gone stiff as a carved wooden chicken, his head buzzing. He had never imagined she could be this clever and ruthless, because refining a spirit-nurturing crystal required a heaven-tier spiritual power method where the refiner would likely explode and die, and where an ordinary student had found such a method he could not guess, meaning she had gambled her life at 9 deaths for one. A lunatic. Meanwhile, everyone finally understood how she had killed the Sansi venomous scorpion in passing. Since with spiritual power at second grade mid-stage, even basic spiritual attacks posed a lethal threat to a beast whose own spiritual power ran far below its blood-chi realm. Jo Cheong-chong roared inside, teeth grinding nearly to powder, demanding of the sky on what grounds any one person's luck could run this good. He knew that from this moment the Vaz school beauty had rewritten her destiny against the heavens, that she would be at least a 9th grade expert someday and might well step into the king level. And the jealousy scorched him, because reason told him he had already lost completely to the Hyun standing before him, and he could neither admit nor accept it. He clenched his fists and clung to one last comfort, that whatever her spiritual talent, her contract beast was still a trash first-grade early-stage mosquito with a low-level bloodline. Its path as a beast tamer already dead-ended, no hope of reaching 5th grade this life, while his own floor was 7th grade, so on that one point at least he stood above her. The leaders reached the same conclusion and wore looks of pity, thinking what a shame it was, such heaven-defying spiritual talent yoked to a mosquito of inferior bloodline. Her road as a beast tamer stalled for good, leaving her only the lower ceiling paths of formation master or spiritual mentalist, neither of which had ever produced an emperor level. Just as they were all busy pitying her, Hyun turned her head and looked at the little netherflame mosquito perched quietly on her shoulder, and I understood at once. Good, good, good. After all this waiting, the mosquito lord finally gets to flex. What era was it? Still clinging to that tired game of hiding one's strength? I was already this magnificent, so I was going to manifest my divinity in front of every last one of them, because to do otherwise was to walk through the night in embroidered silk, seen by no one. Today I would use raw crushing strength and talent to overturn how these high officials saw me, to make them understand that Hyun and I were not lab rats to be manipulated and caged for study, but true peerless geniuses worth pouring every resource into cultivating and protecting. A majestic blood chi of second grade early stage, not one hair inferior to Jo Chungcheon's azure armored wolf, erupted from my tiny body, and on its heels an undisguised bloodline pressure rolled out. Mid-level bloodline. I had noticed it checking my panel earlier, that once my blood chi realm broke into second grade early stage, my bloodline crept up on its own, only a sliver compared to a true evolution, but enough to carry me from low-level 5-star to mid-level 1-star. By this world's theory, that alone lifted my growth ceiling from 3rd grade to 5th grade, and it was not finished. Before anyone could recover, I loosed one more thought and another force poured out, a dense spiritual power aura that had likewise reached second grade early stage, since the crystal's energy had pushed my own spiritual power past 500 points. Now the 3 auras stacked one atop another, blood chi and bloodline and spiritual power, hammering everyone's nerves. If Hyun's spiritual power had been a depth charge across the square, the triple aura off this tiny mosquito was a nuclear bomb at the center of the lake, and it blanked out every brain in the crowd, eyes bulging, mouths hanging open, the whole square petrified together. A soft thud rang out, and everyone turned to find Zhou Chengcheng with lifeless eyes and an ashen face, all strength drained from him, stumbling back 2 steps and slumping to the ground. His lips trembled without sound, his pupils reflecting that little mosquito in its impossible aura, the last of his pride crushed to dust. He had lost, completely, without a shred of suspense. The contract beast realm he was so proud of had been matched by a mosquito that stood at first grade early stage 3 days ago. His spiritual power, once beyond his peers, was not only crushed by Hien but topped by this insect 2 full levels above him. Even the final comfort that its trash bloodline could never reach. 5th grade had collapsed. Since its bloodline had risen to mid-level, its ceiling now 5th grade too. His whole mentality detonated, and all that storm inside him came out as one muttered whisper, asking whether they were hacking. On the rostrum the leaders fared no better, frozen in place, gazes dull and empty. City Lord Im Jinam swallowed hard, turned to Jung Sung-yop, and stammered out whether he was hallucinating, but Jung Sung-yop could not answer, drowning in the same trance. There was simply too much they could not make sense of. Why could a mosquito's blood chi soar from first grade early stage to second grade early stage in 3 days? Why could its spiritual power stand level with its blood chi realm, when in every known record only true dragons and divine phoenixes at Emperor rank 5-star could grow the two in lockstep? And why had its bloodline rank climbed again, unless it had evolved once more, days after its last? Jang Sung-yop had pored over Hyun's records and remembered clearly that she had been a martial arts student for 3 straight years and only a week ago had suddenly contracted a white-striped mosquito, a scrap of trash with blood chi near 0 and no bloodline, then evolved it 3 days ago to its present shape at low-level 5-star. And now, 3 more days on, apparently evolved it again. Looking at the absurd growth rate, he could not shake the thought that it might be a 3rd evolution, and his eye twitched because evolving 3 times in under half a month was a joke, when evolution was the rarest, most precious chance a beast could get, one most never received even once. Yet this mosquito had every facet heaven-defying, so blatant no cheek could match it. Stunned, all of them, province leaders like Jang Sung-yop and President Wang, gang city big shots like Im Jinam and Nang Yan, even the geniuses below the stage. At last they understood. This mosquito could not be measured by any theory or common sense, a monster that transcended everyone's cognition. And Hyun, fated for the king rank after absorbing the crystal, had contracted such a monster, the potential of that pairing near unthinkable. Even if its bloodline locked forever, its ceiling already reached 5th grade, meaning she could contract a 2nd or 3rd stronger beast later. So how high could she climb? King rank was near certain. It might even be emperor rank. Jang Sung-yop's lips trembled, and he shouted to report it at once. He told City Lord Im Jinam, in a tone that brooked no argument, that the secrecy had to be raised to the highest tier immediately, that they must report straight to the Federal Ministry of Education and the Beast Tamer Association headquarters, because this was no longer something Sumyong Province alone could handle. And student Hyun needed the highest standard of treatment, and here his voice went grave as never before, weighing each word, not as some experimental subject, but as a true top-tier genius. Im Jinam swallowed and nodded slowly, knowing he was right that across the tens of billions in the whole Federation, there were only a handful of registered emperor-rank powerhouses, each a pillar of the nation, and their gang city had produced a future emperor. On the other side, Joge and Li Wolyo traded a look and read the same bitterness in each other. From beginning to end, Joge sighed. They had been the clowns. He watched Hyun's back, remembering how he had counted on a single point of advantage to suppress Zhou Chengchan, seize first place, and collect the richest resources, and how laughable that looked now, because she had never cared about these so-called geniuses at all. In a corner, the principal and the dean were soaked in sweat, faces bloodless. The principal half sobbed to old Wang, asking whether they had offended a future king-rank powerhouse, and the dean, near tears, corrected him that by Director Jang's meaning it was more than king rank. It was someone with hope of the emperor rank. Those 2 words pressed down like twin mountains. In all of Gang City, the strongest was Im Jinam at the peak of 8th grade, and king rank stood above the 9th grade entirely, while emperor rank was a legend no one in all of Sumyong Province dared dream of. Just what manner of existence, they kept asking, had they offended? On another side, the president of the Gyeongchip Guild turned to the ashen-faced Nang Yan and sighed slowly, his eyes graver than ever, telling her that they should go and apologize to her. Nang Yan's body jerked, and she looked up sharply, her cold eyes full of unwillingness and refusal. Apologize. Apologize to the woman who had stolen her opportunity and cost the life of her teammate. She could not do it. She, Nang Yan, would never bow her head, not if it killed her. He told her that he knew her pride, but she had to understand that Hyun was no longer someone they could afford to provoke, that if she refused to bow today, the entire Gyeongchip Guild could be wiped out because of her once the girl came into her power. Naing Yan clenched her fists so hard her nails sank into her palms and drew blood that dripped between her fingers, and she never felt it. Silence. A long silence, and then without a word she turned on her heel and strode off the rostrum without a backward glance, vanishing into the distance, unable in the end to lower her noble head. The guild president watched her resolute back and felt nothing but helplessness. Then the mood in the square shifted yet again. On the rostrum, the leaders headed by Jang Songyop, Im Jinam and President Wang exchanged a few words and rose to their feet in unison. Under the stunned gaze of thousands of students, they formed a line and walked toward Hyun with solemn steps, looking less like officials on an inspection than like courtiers going to pay homage to a sovereign. The world had well and truly flipped upside down. Jang Songyop reached her first, drawing a medicinal pill thick with the aura of life from his storage ring, telling her it was a 6th grade creation pill from his private collection, a sacred healing medicine, a meeting gift from her elder, and hoping she would not think it beneath her. Before she could react, City Lord Im Jinam pressed forward with a short sword rippling with light, a mysterious tier mid-rank spiritual tool called Purple Lightning Green Frost. Only a support tool, but one that greatly sped spiritual power recovery, which with her high cultivation suited her perfectly. President Wang was more generous still, producing a secret manual from the bottom of his chest, an Earth-tier low-rank mental technique called the Thousand Soul Piercer, a token from the Spiritual Mentalist Association he begged her to accept. Then the principal, the dean and representatives of every force swarmed in, scrambling to give gifts with fawning smiles. Hyun said nothing, only thinking privately how realistic this crowd was, that she, the Empress, truly disdained mixing with such people. I cut in fast to tell her to take it, all of it, to stop just standing there, because this was the whole point of showing our potential, that it was resources, every bit of it resources, and letting them slip would be a crime. True, she conceded. The grand assessment ended in that surreal atmosphere, Hyun ringed by big shots, her hands going numb from gift after gift, while I lay on her shoulder happily watching the treasures pile up in the storage bag. With a thought I opened the panel. My race read as Molten Blood Mosquito, still evolvable, Bloodline at Intermediate 1 star, Blood Chi at 589.2, and Spiritual Power at 511.7. Both firmly 2nd grade early stage, my evolution points at 91.5. My skills were a tidy chain, the Molten Heart Demon Sting at level 4, Blood Food Tracking at level 3, Molten Insect Hive at level 4, Explosive Flame Flying Feather at level 3. The hint at the bottom said the next evolution needed 500 Blood Chi and 80 evolution points, both met, ready at any time over 24 hours. Staring at that panel, I felt outrageously comfortable. I had banked enough to trigger the 4th evolution whenever I pleased. I only wondered which way it would take me, since the direction seemed to hinge on whose blood I had drunk. It could not be a turtle, could it? I had not sucked that much turtle blood. The bulk of my feeding had been the azure flame flying lion cub, so it should lean that way, though with my spiritual power risen so far I wondered whether that alone might tilt the result. I kept rubbing my forelimbs, anticipation cresting, only mildly annoyed that these idiot leaders would not stop gifting, and that every gift came with a long-winded speech. Since they were handing over resources, I would endure it, and once this wave was banked, I would find a safe place tonight and evolve. Hard cut. A high-speed train out of the provincial capital, Dunan City, slid into Gang City Station, and 2 figures stepped down, a young female teacher with a pretty face and a male teacher with a gentle, steady air, the invigilators sent by Dunnan No. 1 Youngmu High School for Hyun's transfer assessment. The instant they caught the thin spiritual energy in the air, the female teacher Wang Ri nodded her brow and complained that there was not even a basic city spirit gathering formation underground, that with energy this thin, it was no wonder no geniuses came out of here and the place had always been so backward. The male teacher Yu Peng gave her a helpless look, and said her words carried a whiff of privilege, asking whether Gang City simply did not want to build one. Wang Ri turned in genuine confusion and asked what else it could be, and Yu Peng had no reply. She missed his speechlessness entirely and kept grumbling that they did not even know to build a basic city spirit gathering formation, that there was a reason for being backward, and that on top of it they had no self-awareness, since some 3rd year here dared apply to transfer into Dunnan No. 1, whatever they had been thinking. Her tone was pure resentment. Born and raised in a 1st-tier provincial capital, she had never set foot in a city below 2nd tier, let alone a remote county town like Gang City. A full day away by high-speed rail, and anyone would chafe at being packed off somewhere this remote for work. She was nearly certain the applicant could never meet the transfer bar. The gap between the two places a chasm, when even Dunnan No. 1's vice principal was an 8th-grade martial artist strong enough to rival Gang City's city lord. A top genius from a backwater like this would rate no better than an upper-middle honor student in Dunan, and transferring in demanded at least 2nd-grade early stage. when as far as she knew, Gang City had never produced a high schooler past first grade peak. So she felt the applicant was being unreasonable, purely here to waste their time. But the Education Bureau had its regulations, and they had to make the trip. It had dragged them thousands of kilometers for nothing. Wang Ri fumed. The angrier she grew, the more she felt she might die of frustration, muttering that you really could not deny the old saying that poverty and meanness bred unruly people. Beside her, Yu Peng frowned almost imperceptibly and gently counseled her that there was no need for such anger, that educational resources and teaching staff in small cities were simply too poor, that the children here had limited horizons, so it was understandable their thinking was not mature. And did she really have to speak so harshly? He had climbed out of a small city himself, step by step, knew the hardships in his bones, and found such regional contempt distasteful. Wang Ri only curled her lip and said there was nothing harsh about the truth, and Yu Peng fell silent, this woman's sense of superiority too strong to argue with. Not wanting to continue, he changed the subject as they walked, mentioning he had heard the Provincial Education Bureau chief and some provincial government leaders had come to Gang City today, and wondering what for. Haiyun's matter was strictly classified, so ordinary teachers like them naturally had no idea. Wang Ri, who had heard the same without much interest, guessed it was some grassroots outreach, since today was the province-wide senior assessment and by this hour it would have ended, and those big leaders likely left. Then regret crossed her face and she lamented that had she known she would have set out earlier, because she had missed it. What she regretted was not missing Bureau Chief Zhang and the administrative leaders. It was hearing that President Wang of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association had come too, a 7th grade spiritual mentalist, one of the top powerhouses in Dunan. Wang Ri herself was a mid-grade 3 spiritual mentalist, and President Wang had long been her idol, though the status gulf between them was so vast she had never once seen him in person. A spiritual mentalist's combat power was eerie and unpredictable, and within the same grade ordinary martial artists were simply no match. So a 7th grade powerhouse like him could probably trade blows with a 9th grade martial artist. That such a figure had come in person to a backwater like Gang City sent a wave of sympathy and admiration surging through her, thinking how great he was to go to such lengths encouraging students in backward regions. A true role model. Yu Peng looked at that mix of sympathy and admiration and pity on her face and was utterly speechless, unable to follow his colleague's train of thought. He sighed, wanting only to finish the task and leave, and said they should hurry to Gang City Yongmu High School, since student Haiyun should be back at the school by now, and Wang Ri agreed that fine, she wanted to see exactly what level the student was at. Hard cut. Inside the Gang City Lord's mansion, in a luxury suite normally reserved only for senior provincial officials, Haiyun sat quietly on the sofa, calmly flipping through the Earth-tier secret technique, the 1,000-soul piercer that President Wang had given her. Beside her, a dense blood-colored light fully enveloped me, forming a small pulsating cocoon. Around it, the medicinal pills and treasures the leaders had gifted, piled there without much care, were dimming and withering at a visible speed as boundless energy poured into the cocoon. That was right, I had evolved again, actually breaking the common sense of beast-taming history to evolve a 4th time. Haiyun felt a stir inside, but kept her face blank. By rights, she should be shocked and thrilled right now, since this meant her contract beast could very likely evolve without limit, its ceiling unimaginably high, yet there was no ripple in her heart, and she wondered whether this guy had simply battered her numb to shock. She sighed faintly and went back to the manual. Only a short while ago, every soul at the assessment site, students and leaders alike, even Nang Yan, who had already left, had been hauled back to sign a top-tier federal confidentiality agreement. Its terms simple, that everything seen or heard today stayed sealed. The secrecy was pitched more than a notch higher than 3 days before, when there had been only a mosquito of heaven-defying intelligence, high in research value but far from the highest tier. Now it had wholly changed. A genius guaranteed the king grade, perhaps the emperor grade, held strategic value no less than nuclear weapons had before the spiritual energy recovery. A national treasure and a thorn in every hostile power's side, and once her situation leaked, it would invite endless assassinations, when there was more than one nation in this world and the Federation was not necessarily the strongest. So before she matured, every scrap of it had to stay buried. A soft knock came at the suite door, and after Haiyun quietly said to come in, Jiang Songyo pushed it open and entered, his expression far graver than it had been out on the plaza. Behind him came President Wang, this 7th grade spiritual mentalist and top powerhouse of the provincial capital, looking oddly restrained now. Both men's eyes were pulled at once to the pulsating blood-colored cocoon beside the sofa, and shock and horror surfaced on their faces together. President Wang could not contain himself and blurted out a question about what it was, plainly sensing the powerful life fluctuations rolling off it, asking whether it was evolving. Haiyun nodded calmly. President Wang stood dumbstruck, unable to fathom it, since had they not just said it evolved once in the secret realm, so why was it evolving again now? Knowing they had misread it, Hyun explained offhandedly that it had not evolved in the secret realm, that its bloodline grade had simply risen a little for no reason she could name. Jang Sung-yeop and President Wang could only stare. What if for no reason? Raising its bloodline grade without evolving, a thing simply unheard of. Jang Sung-yeop swallowed and could not help asking which evolution this made. The third. Hyun shook her head. No. He blinked, saying that could not be. Then this was the second, so it had only evolved once before and was already this strong. This, Hyun told him, was its fourth evolution, and she added that it had been less than half a month. The two of them went numb, completely numb. What manner of creature was this, not only shattering the ironclad rule that beasts evolved only 3 times, but managing 4 in under half a month? They realized that even thinking its potential shocking, they had still vastly underestimated it, a potential not merely huge but flatly unimaginable. Hyun looked at them with an expression that said they really had not seen much of the world, and asked with a trace of impatience whether Bureau Chief Jang needed something from her. Jang Song-yeop drew a deep breath, forced his shock down, and spoke earnestly. It was like this. They had already reported her situation to the Federation, and the intent from above was clear, that her safety came before all else, which meant she need not sit the joint entrance exam or transfer to Dunham No. 1 at all. Within 2 days at most, the Federal Ministry of Education would send someone to escort her to the capital, where she could enroll at either Hwacheong University or Yon University, the 2 foremost institutions, and where her safety could be guaranteed to the fullest. It described treatment no student in the whole Federation would ever dare dream of. Hyun only closed the manual calmly and shook her head faintly. No, she could skip the joint entrance exam, but she had to transfer schools, and she would never attend Hwacheong University or Yen University as a student of Gang City Youngmu High School. Jang Seong-yeop was baffled, asking why, whether it made any difference. She lifted her eyelids, her cold clear eyes without a ripple, and said that it did, because they did not deserve it, did not deserve to bask in her glory. He opened his mouth and for a moment found nothing to say. He knew well enough how the principal and dean of Gang City Youngmu High had treated her before, understood the resentment coiled in her. He had only not expected her to be quite this vengeful. But it did not matter, hardly a big deal, merely moving a student record, a matter of a single sentence. He nodded, said he understood, gave up persuading her, took out his phone and dialed the principal of Dunham No. 1 directly. The call connected fast. He said calmly that this was Jang Sang-yeop of the Provincial Education Bureau. A panicked voice came back from the other end, stammering out his title and asking why the bureau chief was calling personally. Jang Seong-yeop got straight to the point, asking Principal Jin whether his school had recently received a transfer application for someone named Hyun. Principal Jin asked him to hold, and there was a flurry of scrambling, and a minute later his voice returned to confirm that yes, they had, that it was indeed so, and they had already sent 2 teachers over to run her assessment. Forget the assessment. Jang Song-yeop cut in, telling him to process her enrollment at once. Every procedure finished within the day. Principal Jin faltered, asking why, and Jang Sung-yeop told him it concerned top-secret federal information, and not to ask what he should not, and Principal Jin, badly startled, hurried to agree that he would handle it right away. After a pause, Principal Jin added with some difficulty that the 2 teachers they had sent for the assessment seemed to have nearly reached Gang City Youngmu High School, but were temporarily unreachable by phone, and he did not know the situation. Jang Song-yeop went quiet, only then recalling that to ensure secrecy, he had just had someone install a signal jammer around the school. Never mind. He hung up, thought a moment, turned to President Wang, who had been listening in silence, and raised a brow, suggesting he make a trip to tell those 2 teachers to go home. President Wang stared, asking whether he meant him, a 7th grade spiritual mentalist, to handle so trivial an errand. Jang Song-yeop said calmly that he knew how Dunnan people were, their sense of superiority strong, their regard for small places like Gang City low, that the 2 teachers would likely have a poor attitude no ordinary person could hold in check, so he would have to trouble President Wang to go. President Wang frowned, still displeased, thinking privately that they were just 2 teachers a subordinate could handle, that he was no one's underling, and the Education Bureau had nothing to do with his Spiritual Mentalist Association. So on what grounds could he be ordered about? This was too demeaning. He absolutely would not go, and he opened his mouth to invent an excuse. Then Hyun glanced at him and said softly that she would appreciate it. President Wang shuddered and snapped to attention, his face breaking into a flattered smile as he thumped his chest and swore it was no trouble at all, that serving her was his honor, that she could rest assured he would never let those 2 blind fools disturb her peace, and then he spun around and strode out the door. Running errands for a future Emperor Realm powerhouse was a chance countless people would kill for, and forget an errand. Had she asked him to break the 2 teachers' legs, he would have done it with joy. Jang Song-yeop only gave his retreating back a speechless glance. He then told Hayun that if she wanted Dunan, that was fine. They could set off tomorrow, that although it fell short of the capital, it was still one of the top 10 first-tier cities in the Federation, and far safer than Gang City, where he did not feel at ease leaving her long. Hayun nodded, no objection. To be honest, she had long since had no wish to remain in this dump of a place, its spiritual energy pitifully thin, its resources scarce. When emptying the whole city lord's mansion could not yield a single Earth-tier technique, and staying here even she might need centuries to touch the Emperor realm. But she glanced at the pulsing cocoon and said they should wait for it to finish evolving first. Jang Sung-yap followed her gaze and asked roughly how long so he could arrange the itinerary. She thought it over, since this guy's evolution time stretched longer each round, 10 hours last time, likely 15 or 16 now, and gave a conservative estimate of tomorrow around noon. He said he would return then and left, and the room fell quiet again. Hayun looked at the cocoon and quietly counted the hours, 15 or 16, and decided she would simply wait, and rather than read further, she closed her eyes and began digesting the flood of spiritual power insight the day had brought. She had been in meditation less than an hour when a crisp sound like an eggshell splitting rang out in the still room. Her eyes snapped open, and she looked toward the sound in astonishment to find the blood-colored cocoon already laced with spiderweb cracks. What was happening was the evolution somehow already done. And this fast? She sat dazed a moment, her gaze sliding instinctively to the sofa beside the cocoon, where the great heap of pills, spirit tools, and natural treasures had lost every trace of luster, not a hint of energy fluctuation left. The leaders had gifted her too much, and there had been plenty of items in Yumyang's storage bag as well, from which she had done a rough inventory and tossed some useless trinkets onto the pile. It had turned out that while this mosquito evolved, it had drained every one of those things dry, and amazement filled her eyes as she wondered whether absorbing the energy from all of it had drastically shortened the evolution time. Before she could think further, the cocoon burst apart with a boom into a sky full of blood-colored light motes that scattered into the air. A brand new monster, ferocious and beautiful at once, slowly stretched itself out from within, and even numbed as she was, Hayun could not help clicking her tongue at the new form. With this evolution, my body had swelled again, from about 10 centimeters to nearly 18, as large as an adult's palm, already as long as the readers of this book. And the change in appearance was far greater. On my once pitch-black carapace, the dark red lava patterns had evolved into strange interwoven markings of deep blue and dark red, and while I still exuded the aura of scorching flame, there now rolled off me a powerful wave of spiritual power. Hayun was startled, wondering whether the mosquito, having devoured so much spiritual power and spirit-nurturing crystal energy, had fused the power of the azure flame with its spiritual power outright after evolving, whether it could even evolve like that, thinking it really did evolve according to whatever it sucked. Nor was that where I had changed most. Around my head drifted a ring of domineering light flame made of pure fire, like a lion's mane, swaying faintly with my breath. Truly majestic. Along the edges of my wings, a clear layer of flame in mingled deep red and deep blue had ignited, leaving scorched trails in the air as they vibrated. Even my signature thick, long proboscis had grown sturdier and more ferocious. Longer by 2 centimeters, wisps of blue-red firelight coiling at its tip and giving off an eerie, dangerous air. The scorching dominance of the azure flame-flying lion and a cold, uncanny spiritual force had merged into one. The fourth evolution, Hayun murmured, had not only broken the ironclad law again, but taken the direction of evolution somewhere even more inconceivable, and she felt she understood this mosquito less and less. Then the newly evolved me circled excitedly in front of her twice, kicking up a scorching current, my buzz several times louder than before, loud enough to ache in her ears. Hayun could only think that after so many evolutions it still could not evolve the sound away, and how genuinely annoying it was. I asked her through the blood contract how she liked it, whether I was handsome, and told her to just say it, handsome or not. I was insufferably smug, having never expected the evolution to finish so fast this round, the promised 24 hours not even a third spent. I glanced at the heap of dim, near-ruined pills and treasures below and understood why. Evolution time could be shortened, and all I needed was to pile natural treasures nearby and let the automatic absorption cut the duration. I had worried future evolutions would only lengthen. The deeper the sleep, the greater the danger. And now, so long as I stockpiled enough resources first, I could shrink that window of vulnerability. An unlooked-for delight. I opened the panel to survey the gains. The panel updated, and I devoured it. My race now read as Netherflame Blood Mosquito. My lifespan 20 years. My bloodline leaping to intermediate 5-star. My blood chi at 521.4. And spiritual power at 788.1. Both second grade early stage, my evolution points down to 11 and 5. A new passive, Monarch's Pressure at level 1. A raft of new active skills, the Soul-Devouring Thorn at level 5, the Molten Insect Hive at level 5, Netherworld Vision at level 4, the Soul Burst Flame Feather at level 4. and the Nether Flame battle armor at level 1. The note at the bottom told me the next evolution would demand 2,000 blood chi and 350 evolution points. Staring at that luxurious panel, I nearly spun a full turning flourish in midair from sheer excitement. Another epic tier windfall. My spiritual power had jumped by over 200 points on its own, my bloodline vaulting from intermediate 1-star to intermediate 5-star, one step short of an advanced bloodline. And this evolution had unlocked 2 brand new skills, one passive and one active, while every older skill upgraded as well. I read the details, starting with the biggest change, the flame upgrade. My Azure Flame power had become the soul-devouring Nether Flame, fusing my spiritual power with the source flame of the Azure Flame Flying Lion into a higher-order soul flame. Now every fire-type skill carried a fierce spiritual burn, able not only to incinerate an enemy's body but to strike straight at their soul, a brutal counter against spiritual mentalists and formation masters. Once it attached to a target, it stayed inextinguishable until my spiritual power ran dry. Now I was a mage too, a mage lord dealing soul damage, and since nearly all my skills traced back to that flame, this single upgrade lifted my whole offensive line to a new order. Next, the 2 new skills. Monarch's Pressure fused my spiritual power with the Lion King bloodline into a passive aura, so that any creature of lower grade and lower spiritual power would feel fear rise from its soul and find its strength suppressed. The 2 weak or feeble-willed collapsing without a fight or dying on the spot. The Nether Flame battle armor condensed the soul-devouring Nether Flame into a semi-solid armor, majestic as a lion, spikes at the shoulders, wreathed in a monarch's nether fire, greatly raising physical and fire resistance and letting me absorb any fire attack no more than 2 grades above me. Its soul-burning pain effect inflicted dual burning of body and soul on anything that touched it. Offense and defense in one, plainly grown out of the old molten armor, and who would dare call a Mosquito squishy now, when I was a flying tank? Then the old skills, each upgraded once. My Molten Heart Demon Sting had become the soul-devouring Thorn, my mouth part now carrying the Nether Flame so a single pierce burned flesh and soul together. My Molten Insect Hive could enchant its insects into self-exploding flame insects, with doubled blast power and a mental shock effect. My Explosive Flame-Flying Feather had become the Soul Burst Flame Feather, its wing blades upgraded to Nether Flame blades that carried a mental strike on impact. A crushing improvement across the board. Then the last skill, the one that mattered most. My blood food tracking had been wholly reworked into Netherworld vision, no longer simple tracking but a spiritual power domain of 3,000 meters, centered on me, within which nothing could hide. A real radar, I crowed, then corrected myself. A mosquito radar, because before I could see nothing but creatures with blood, and now it was nearly a cultivator's divine sense. Everything within range lay bare. Having taken stock of it all, I felt the explosive new power inside me and my confidence swelled. My blood chi value had not changed, but I had learned a stack of higher order techniques, and my combat power had soared several times over. The next evolution wanted 2,000 blood chi and 350 evolution points, and that 2,000 was the 3rd grade early stage threshold, which meant every future evolution would demand breaking a full grade. But it did not matter. All I had to do was keep sucking blood, growing and evolving without limit, enough to make any powerhouse in this world die of envy. Only 12 days since I became a mosquito, and I had already risen this high. Once calm, I chewed on a crucial question. Since my skills upgraded on their own with every evolution, was it still worth spending precious evolution points to upgrade them by hand, when the points were so hard to come by and always lagged behind my blood chi? Then the system told me there was a serious flaw in my thinking, that the automatic upgrade during evolution was a mechanical upgrade, whereas point spot upgrades improved a skill's stats. My swarm space, for instance, had auto-upgraded to the Molten Insect Hive across 2 evolutions, gaining insect self-destruction and mental shock, yet its space and its cap of 1,000 insects had not changed at all, while spending points would double that storage every time. I saw. Put that way, upgrading skills separately was very much worth it, since no matter how high the mechanics ran, they still needed stats to hold them up. But that put me back in a bind, because the logic was sound and the trouble was that evolution points were genuinely not enough. Every evolution eating a massive stack of them, and merely gathering enough for one took real effort. Then the system dropped a warm reminder that there was more than one way to obtain evolution points besides sucking blood. I was stunned and demanded to know why it had not said so earlier. The system answered seriously that it was because I had not been worthy before. I gaped. This dog of a system was throwing in personal attacks now. It explained calmly that beyond sucking blood, I had 3 more routes to evolution points. First, I could suck the sap of spiritual herbs of 3rd grade or higher and convert their life essence into points, though such herbs were usually guarded by 3rd grade beasts. The Inkjade Black Turtle, a special case because the Blackstone Secret Realm's spiritual energy was so low its strongest beast capped at 2nd grade mid-stage, and with my old strength, raiding 4th grade beast would have been suicide. It paused, then added that it was about the same now and I could only grind my teeth. Second, I could earn bonus points by killing enemies at least 2 minor realms above me. So at 2nd grade early stage, I would have to kill something at 2nd grade late stage or higher, which my former weakness had made impossible. Third, feedback from my blood contract partner, since every time Hyun raised her blood chi realm, she fed a portion of pure energy back to me. I balked, asking when that setting had appeared, since she had upgraded so many times and I had never seen a scrap of it. The system said the method needed the mutual trust and intimacy between us both to reach 60 or higher. The greater the values, the greater the feedback. And that in her eyes, I had long been nothing but a trash mosquito, so that even now, after everything, our numbers had only just barely crossed 60. I said nothing. The system asked whether I was all right. I told it I was fine. I only sort of wanted to die. The system replied that it had received my message and was currently drafting a suicide plan on my behalf. I felt a blood vessel about to burst in my skull, certain this damnable system was doing it on purpose. After everything, it came down to my having been too useless before, but could I be blamed for that? When I had started as a mosquito, and a white-striped mosquito with only days of life left at that, a disastrous start, and it was already a miracle I had survived. I ranted wildly inside, but thinking it over, what the system said was not really wrong. Forget it. However heartbreaking the delivery, there were 3 more ways to gather evolution points now, and life was finally starting to look up. Though then again, I shot the Empress a resentful look, since after all the times we had been through life and death together, my trust value had only just cleared 60, which was too unfair by half. Hyun rested with her eyes shut, feeling plainly that as my evolution completed, a surge of energy far more majestic and pure than before fed back into her through the blood contract, the 1/10 vitality feedback from her contract beast. Though this mosquito's vitality value had not risen, she could feel the quality of what it fed back was several times purer, as if its bloodline had climbed again. If its earlier feedback resembled a martial artist practicing yellow rank techniques, its current quality matched at least a mid-grade black rank 1, and at the same realm, the purer the vitality, the higher the combat power. She was quietly delighted, thinking that if this mosquito kept evolving until it reached an imperial level bloodline, the feedback might not fall short of the dragon she had contracted in her past life, and she had to admit it had already earned the right to be her true companion. Then all at once she felt an almost tangible wave of resentment coming up the other end of the bloodline connection. What was it feeling wronged about now? She looked at the netherflame blood mosquito circling in the air, unable to work it out, since this guy had just evolved and rocketed in strength, so he ought to be overjoyed. And why had he gone sullen? I cursed this disloyal empress inside, and then let my mood settle, because however wildly the system had stabbed at me, the road ahead was wider now. Very good, very good. Through Hyun's inner thoughts, I picked up that we would set off for Dunnan City tomorrow. Dunnan City, capital of Sumyong Province, a super city said to have drained the whole province dry, ranked in the Federation's top 10, its experts and geniuses surely as thick as hair, its demonic beasts and rare bloodlines nothing like what Gang City could offer. When the time came, I was going to suck and suck and suck. Hard cut. At the entrance of Gang City Youngmu High School, Wang Ri and Yu Peng climbed out of a taxi. Finally here, Wang Ri grumbled. This crappy place where you could not even hail a private car, her complaints having run unbroken the whole way. Yu Peng rubbed his brow, his face full of exhaustion, and urged her to say less, that they should find the student fast, take her to Dunnan, and the mission would be done. Just then a figure walked briskly toward them, in a white robe, elegant in bearing, his brow carrying a powerful authority that commanded without anger. Wang Ri glanced over and froze, and then her face broke into disbelieving joy as she recognized President Wang. He had not left yet. She had never dreamed she would lay eyes on her idol here, the vice president of the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, a 7th grade expert, Wang Zhengmyong. She had admired his manner across countless conference photos, that face she could never mistake, and her heart pounded wildly. While overjoyed, she also grasped that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, that she had to perform well before her idol, that maybe, just maybe, if President Wang took a liking to her, he might make an exception and let her into the Provincial Spiritual Mentalist Association, the Holy Land every spiritual mentalist in Sumyong Province dreamed of, a single step into heaven. Wang Zhengmyong, for his part, was mildly surprised to run into the 2 teachers the moment he arrived, and seeing the female teacher rush over so excited, he frowned in confusion. She greeted him breathlessly, introducing herself as Wang Ri, a teacher from Dunnan No. 1 and a grade 3 spiritual mentalist, saying she had admired him for so long, her voice trembling with excitement. Wang Zhengmyong nodded faintly and asked with a note of impatience whether they were the teachers Dunnan No. 1 had sent to run the assessment. And Wang Ri, startled, asked how he knew. I guessed, he said. brushing her off. She thought nothing of it, assuming he had inferred it from her done in number 1 uniform, and hurried to confirm that yes, they had indeed come about a student's transfer application. Then she exhaled at length, her face composing itself into just the right measure of fatigue and grievance, and launched into a lament about how hard the trip to Gang City had been, a whole day on the high-speed rail, no private car to be had after they got off, forced to cram into a filthy taxi for a long and bumpy ride before they arrived. Wang Zhengmiang could only stare. Who had asked her? Whether she was tired or not was none of his concern. Yu Peng, standing beside her, felt his own eyelids twitching, mortified, thinking that sister they had ridden in first class and the taxi had been perfectly clean, and was her act not laid on a bit thick. Wang Ri noticed neither reaction and pressed on with her self-directed performance, her tone shifting suddenly to the righteous, as she declared that though the journey was hard and the conditions crude, as a glorious teacher of the people they could conquer any hardship or fatigue. That for the reputation of done in number 1, and to honor the school's trust they treated every task with seriousness and responsibility. She puffed out her chest like a martyr for a great cause, proclaiming that they had traveled thousands of miles to assess the transfer applicant in person, ensuring their school's admission standards stayed absolutely fair, just and open. Wang Zhengmiang could only look at her, so could Yu Peng, who could no longer bear to watch, and silently turned his head aside, his toes practically carving a 3-bedroom apartment into the front of his shoes, thinking that being a colleague to such an idiot was truly a sin. Wang Ri only warmed to her theme, feeling her performance particularly on point, and slapped her thigh, telling President Wang that speaking of this she was full of indignation, that they had come this time for a student named Haiyun, whose application to transfer into Dunnan number 1 was simply absurd. Out in the dark schoolyard, Wang Ri was still going, complaining that the Federation's transfer system was broken, demanding to know why any student could file an application, insisting there had to be a threshold. She spat that this Haiyun was flat out abusing the regulations, treating them like fools, dragging them all the way from Dunnan City for nothing. One look and you could tell the girl had no quality, she said, and even with decent talent, a temperament like that would never amount to anything. While she talked, she kept sliding her eyes toward President Wang, angling for her idol's approval, certain that a big figure like Wang Zhengmiang would surely despise a student who abused the rules and lacked all self-awareness. In her own head, the speech was perfect, flaunting a serious work ethic, the system's flaws and her political instincts, all at once. What she got back was not praise. President Wang's face grew darker by the second, dark enough to drip water, and then a single crisp splat cracked across the quiet night and sent Wang Ri spinning through the air before she crashed to the ground. Half her face swelled up and blood leaked from the corner of her mouth, as she sat there stunned, covering her cheek, her mind blank, unable to grasp why her idol had struck her. Yu Peng, standing nearby, was scared out of his wits, frozen stiff and not daring to breathe. President Wang looked down at Wang Ri with eyes cold enough to kill, his voice shaking with fury, and demanded whether she thought she was even worthy of gossiping about Miss Haiyun behind her back. He demanded what kind of thing she thought she was, whether she had the faintest idea of Miss Haiyun's status now. Never mind her, he snarled. Even if the principal of Dunnan number 1 Yongnu High School himself came, he would have to be respectful when he met Miss Haiyun, and even he, President Wang, would have to. Halfway through, he caught himself, realizing he had nearly let slip something he had no business saying, because the Federation's highest-level secrecy agreement was no joke. He swallowed the rest of it, pulled in a long breath, and jabbed a finger at the two of them, warning them coldly that Miss Haiyun needed no transfer assessment at all, that her enrollment at Dunnan number 1 was already finalized, her coming here only a transition, a formality, and she would not even sit the joint examination because she already had guaranteed admission to Huaqiang University in Kyungdae. So what right did the two of them have to point fingers at her? He told them to get back to Dunnan this instant, and that if he ever heard them wagging their tongues about her again, they should not blame him for being impolite, then turned and walked back toward the school without another glance. Wang Ri and Yu Peng stood there like wooden statues, their hearts churning. The ride back was a suffocating thing, and Wang Ri clutched her swollen face, her eyes dull, still not recovered from the shock. After a long silence, Yu Peng ventured that he had told her to keep a low profile away from home, instead of throwing her weight around, and that running into someone tough was just her own bad luck. Her whole body jerked and her head snapped up, her eyes full of humiliation and resentment and a bewilderment she could not shake, and she burst out asking what exactly this Haiyun was, why President Wang would strike her that hard over some student from Gang City, why he would say that even the principal of Dunnan No 1 had to treat the girl with respect, that even he himself had to. It was too much to swallow. Yu Peng sat quiet for a moment, then pieced together President Wang's words into a guess even he found outrageous, wondering aloud whether the girl might be the illegitimate daughter of some top-tier family in the Federation, only recently found and taken back in, the only explanation that fit since nothing else could make a man of President Wang's stature so wary. Wang Ri's eyes flickered wildly at that. A big family, an illegitimate daughter, so this Haiyun had leaned on connections to get parachuted straight into Dunan number 1, and instantly a hot, coiling jealousy wrapped itself around her heart like a venomous snake, as she came from an ordinary working family, she thought, and had ground her way up on 10 times the effort of anyone else, draining her family dry, clawing to 3rd grade at 30, and barely squeezing into Dunan number 1 as a plain teacher. The proudest thing she had ever done, and now some country girl lucky in the womb could waltz into what she had dreamed of. It was not fair. Dunan No 1 was the holy land of cultivation in the eyes of every student in Sumyong province, a place she had once looked up to without daring to hope. She ground her teeth and spat that she saw it all clearly now, that in the end the world came down to background and birth, that there was no fairness anywhere, that people like her who climbed rung by rung on their own sweat were nothing beside a silver spoon child born at the finish line. Yu Peng had no answer for that. Privately, he noted the irony that she wanted equality from those above her and rigid class from everyone below. The more Wang Ri chewed on it, the angrier she got, her eyes going red, and she muttered that background or not, a girl raised in a dump like Gang City could hardly be strong, that the records had the transfer at only 1st grade mid-stage, which would put her dead last at Dunan number 1. The joint examination was 3 days out, she said, and the country girl would get her humiliation then, crushed by real geniuses into a laughingstock, and picturing it she felt a little better. Yu Peng looked at her without expression and reminded her she must not have heard President Wang because the girl was guaranteed admission to Huaqiang University in Kyongdae. Wang Ri's face froze solid. The whole world seemed to go silent at guaranteed admission to the 2 top institutions in the entire Federation. The Holy Ground's countless geniuses clawed each other bloody to reach, simply handed over. She lost the last thread of control and let out a frantic cracking scream inside the little taxi, shrieking why her, which family was it, that it was too unfair. Too much bullying, her whole mind collapsing on the spot. The driver's face went black. He snapped that she must be a lunatic, that she had not shut up since she climbed in, and told them both to get out. He pulled over and threw them onto the curb. Yu Peng got out without a word. The next morning, a military transport aircraft stood waiting at the temporary airfield in Gang City, its hull forged from special alloy and etched all over with intricate formation patterns, ferried in overnight by the provincial government for the sole purpose of escorting Haiyun. Jang Song-yop led the team himself, backed by 5 7th grade martial artists, a lineup heavy enough to move a provincial governor. With a tremendous roar, the craft climbed into the sky, vanished into the clouds, and set course for Dunan City thousands of miles off. Inside the cabin, Haiyun sat quietly by the window, and with a thought she loosed the azure flame-flying lion cub from her beast-taming bag so it could stretch. Born only days ago, the little thing had already grown past 1/2 meter, its golden fur thickening by the day and giving off a faint, scorching heat, its blood chi already up to 1st grade mid-stage. That growth only held during infancy, since a high-level bloodline beast needed 7 or 8 years, sometimes more than a decade, to peak, unless a fortune and resources shortened the road. Having confirmed she could walk the path of beast taming again, she meant to start raising this cub in earnest, so she drew a slab of 2nd grade demon beast meat from her storage bag and held it out, telling it flatly to eat. The cub sniffed the food warily, then turned its head away and ignored her completely. Haiyun stared, thrown. Right then the cub caught a scent it knew and jerked its head up, spotting me dozing on her shoulder, and its eyes lit up as it trotted over whimpering and fawning, working hard to win the attention of the mosquito it had decided was its mother. I looked down at the silly thing that had my address wrong and told it impatiently through our linked bloodline that if she said eat, then it should eat. The cub understood, clamped its jaws on the meat in Haiyun's hand, and dug in. I could feel the Empress's mood curdle behind me, the dignified beast-taming Empress of 2 lifetimes, unable to command a single cub, forced to route her orders through a mosquito. She watched it all with a flat face and a heart full of complicated things. A few hours later, the craft slid into Dunan City airspace, and Jang Song-yop and the 5 7th grade martial artists all let out the same breath, because entering Dunan meant absolute safety. The sky over the whole city was sealed under an imperial-grade defensive formation, laid down personally by the Federation's top formation master, the Sky Shield, a thing that not even a king-rank powerhouse could break, that even an emperor-rank arrival could not tear open with ease. Jang Seng-yop came over, his shoulders loosening, and told her that now they were in Dunan she could move about freely, and he would arrange somewhere for her to stay, though he still suggested she remain at the school. The safest places outside the Federation's military bases, he said, were the top universities, since behind every school stood the Ministry of Education, one of the two great departments of the Federation, and no one dared make trouble there. He added that as one of the top 10 high schools in the country, Dunon No. 1 had an underground spirit-gathering formation with spiritual energy density and cultivation resources of the very first rank. The spiritual medicine especially, since the school held a deep partnership with the local pharmaceutical giant, the So Group, whose spirit herb stores were second to none in the nation. The instant he said spiritual medicine, my antennae shot up, because spirit herbs were just evolution points in a costume. We absolutely had to go, and today no one alive was keeping me out of school. Jang Sung-yup went on that he had already spoken with the school, and they had a large batch of resources set aside for her, hers to collect directly, a welcome gift arranged by the Federation in advance. For anything beyond that, the Federation still hoped she would fight with her own strength, since what they wanted to raise were peerless geniuses who could stand alone, not flowers in a greenhouse. Hayun nodded that she understood. He hesitated, then added one last warning that once she was in Dunan, it was best not to let slip too easily that she came from Gang City, because people here carried a heavy sense of superiority and looked down on outsiders, especially from remote little places like hers. She nodded again. She already knew. Though she had spent little time in Dunan in her past life, she had heard the rumors that a landmark tower hundreds of meters tall stood at the city's heart, and there was a running internet joke that you must never speak a country dialect beneath it, or the thing would flip into a defense tower and blast the intruder to slag. A joke, but a joke that said everything about how deep the local xenophobia ran. The craft set down cleanly at the Dunan military field, and a hovercar with a special plate was already waiting. As the vehicle rolled into the city, the view outside pried my compound eyes wide open. Skyscrapers stabbing into the clouds with runes flowing over their faces. The sky ribbed with orderly hovercar lanes, and now and then, down on the ground, a great contract beast hauling a magnificent beast carriage passed at a stately pace. The pedestrians here mostly carried auras above first grade, and I spotted plenty of 4th and 5th grade experts among them. Compared to Gang City, it was another world. Soon the hovercar stopped before a school gate grand enough to swallow a small town, the gilded characters spelling Dunan No. 1 Yongmu High School in bold sweeping strokes that gave off an invisible pressure. A middle-aged man in a well-cut suit had waited there a long while, and the moment they stepped out he came forward beaming, introducing himself as the dean, surnamed Joe, welcoming them with a warmth that shaded into reverence, his eyes fixed on Hayun full of curiosity and awe. He had been hauled out of bed the night before by a call from the principal, who told him in an unprecedentedly grave tone to receive a transfer from Gang City at the highest possible specification, because she was tangled in a Federation top secret, and it had scared Dean Joe enough that he had not slept and had stood guard at the gate since dawn. Jang Sang-yup returned the courtesy briefly and took his leave. His mission done, the rest handed off to the school. Dean Joe led Hayun onto the campus, chattering warmly as they walked, explaining that as the best high school in the province, Dunan No. 1 used a streaming system for the 3rd year, sorting students by strength into ordinary classes, elite classes, and the hidden dragon class. Ordinary students sat around first grade late stage, and the elite classes demanded at least first grade peak with fewer than 200 students across the whole 3rd year. The summit of it all was the hidden dragon class, his voice swelling with pride as he called it the school's true trump card. Only 8 students, every one a peerless genius already specially recruited by the 2 top universities, Huaqiang and Kyongdae. Everyone at least 2nd grade mid-stage, 2 already broken through to 2nd grade peak. I listened, floored. Back in Gang City, first grade peak students like Zhou Changchang and Li Wolyo had been the top of the whole city, yet here it was just the entry ticket to the elite class. Dean Joe went on with a smile that under the arrangements from above, since Miss Hayun was recommended for admission to Huaqiang University, she had naturally been placed in the hidden dragon class. As it happened, he said, those 8 were not even supposed to be at school today, but hearing yesterday that a new student was arriving, they had grown curious and shown up anyway, probably to welcome her, since young people loved a bit of excitement. He suggested she head to the classroom first to meet her new classmates while he went to the academic affairs office to fetch the resources the Federation and the school had prepared. I grumbled to her that welcome was a generous word, that they just wanted to look at whatever holy being had been airdropped in. Certain some big shot's descendant had come parachuting down. Hayun did not mind and nodded calmly. To her it made no difference where she went, so long as the resources were there to rebuild her strength as fast as possible. Meanwhile, in the hidden dragon class's private cultivation room, 8 cushions of 1,000-year-cold jade sat in a luxuriously wide space, the walls sheathed in spirit-gathering formations, the spiritual energy so thick it was nearly a thing you could touch. 8 young figures sat cross-legged, the pinnacle of the younger generation not only of Dunan No. 1, but of all Sumyong province. A handsome youth with a faintly flamboyant air spoke first, remarking that for an out-of-town transfer to drop straight into the hidden dragon class at this exact moment, the newcomer must carry quite a background. His name was So Ran, a direct scion of the So family of Dunan, the clan behind the So group, the giant that owned the alchemy and pharmaceutical trade across all of Dunan and most of the province. So Ran himself was a second-grade peak beast tamer, whose contract beast was a king level 3-headed crimson flame lion. A long-haired girl with a still water-like calm answered indifferently that it was all rather ridiculous. Her name was Choi Ran of the second-rate Cho family of Dunan. Her martial arts already at second-grade peak, and she shared the Cho surname with me by pure accident. No relation whatsoever. Another of the 8 wondered aloud who the transfer could be, since only 3 days remained before the joint examination, and someone was being airdropped straight into their class. So Rand curled his lip and said there was nothing to wonder about, that either the newcomer was a monster so heaven-defying the school made an exception, or they carried a massive background. When a ponytailed girl guessed the newcomer might be a prodigy from another city in the province, Soran sneered, asking whether any place in Suimyang outside Dunan could produce a single talent. Someone agreed at once, sniffing that those little places lacked even a basic citywide spirit-gathering formation, their spiritual energy pitifully thin, and their coffers empty, so even the finest talent born there was wasted, since the true watershed of a life was the womb and some people were born at the finish line. Harsh words, but of the 8 in the room, 7 came from powerful, wealthy Dunan families, raised on resources outsiders could not imagine, and only 1 was the exception. Just then a boy scrolling the campus forum on his phone cried out, saying someone had exposed the transfer student's background, and every gaze in the room snapped to him. An anonymous post was rocketing to the top of the board, headlined that the connected student airdropped into the Hidden Dragon class had been unmasked, and demanding to know where the fairness was. The post claimed the transfer was named Ha-Yun, out of a remote little place called Gang City, that her martial arts strength was only first grade mid-stage, that she was a beast tamer whose contract beast was a white-striped mosquito. It closed by revealing with total confidence that she was the long-hidden illegitimate daughter of a capital family big shot, only lately acknowledged, airdropped in purely because her family had forced it through. The whole cultivation room went dead silent. The 8 favored children traded looks. Choi Ran recovered first, frowning that an anonymous post was hardly credible, that Gang City and first grade mid-stage and a white-striped mosquito were too absurd to be anything but trolling. So Rand raised an eyebrow and pulled out his own phone, saying why not simply check that he would have his family use their authority to pull the student registry in Gang City. A minute's work. In under 30 seconds a file chimed onto his screen, and his face froze, then twisted into pure absurd disbelief as he swore that it was all true. Reading off that the Gang City Youngmu High School records listed Ha-Yun at vitality rating first grade mid-stage with a contract beast logged as a white-striped mosquito. Every word a match. Now no one doubted it, because the truth sounded even more ridiculous than the rumor. So Rand's eyes went wide as he blurted that she was first grade mid-stage and had contracted a white-striped mosquito, the trashiest breed of mosquito there was, hardly even a proper animal, asking whether there was something wrong with her head. Choi Ran frowned and searched Gang City on her phone, her face going strange as she read that it was a county-level town that did not even rank 3rd tier, one of the very bottom cities of the whole province. No wonder the girl was so weak, and concluded that after all the noise the transfer was just a pure through-and-through connected student. Expressions curdled all around the room, disdain and amusement and a threat of calculation. They had braced for a strong opponent and gotten a piece of trash hauling a heaven-tall background. So Rand curled his lip, losing interest, wary of the background but caring nothing for the girl herself, and the others found it equally dull, since someone who slipped in through the back door was not worth their time. Then the refined boy in gold-rimmed glasses beside Cho Ran told So Ran not to be so quick to leave, his eyes glinting as he pointed out that she herself might be trash, but the post named her the illegitimate daughter of a top capital family, and even just forging a connection would pay off handsomely for their futures. Several of them paused at that, because for all their weight, even the top-tier So family behind So Ran could not match the great families of the capital up there at the foot of the throne. But right then, a youth in the corner who had held his silence the whole time stood abruptly. He was slightly thin, plain-faced, his eyes fierce with resolve, wearing a faded old uniform that clashed with all the glossy rich children around him. His name was Jin Zhang, the lone outlier of the Hidden Dragon class, the only one from an ordinary working family. And his fists were clenched white, his body faintly trembling, as he said in a hoarse, furious voice that this was too much, that it was unjust, demanding to know why a connected student like her could stride straight into their Hidden Dragon class. The others watched him with varied looks but no surprise, because they all knew his past, a truly hard man, a madman who had clawed up from the bottom on nothing but desperation and talent. His parents had been the most ordinary of workers, and to fund his cultivation, to get him into Dunan number 1 and pull him above his class, the family had paid in blood, His father had worked himself to death on construction sites for a little more resource money, dropping dead of overwork for a compensation payout that was a drop in the bucket, against cultivation costs in the hundreds of thousands and millions. His mother, in her desperation, had taken out ruinous predatory loans just to scrape the entry fee for the elite class. Only after Jin Jung ground to the top of that class on sheer will and talent, catching the school's eye and winning a larger cut of resources, had the family eased at all. To him, the word fairness had been bought with his father's life and his mother's dignity, and every seat and every resource in the school was sacred, so a nobody of unknown origin, a first-grade mid-stage with a trash mosquito, using so-called background to steal a place that should have gone to someone more hardworking and gifted, was not just injustice but a desecration of everything his parents had bled for. He said he could not accept it, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at the door like an enraged lion cub, declaring he would go to the principal and the education bureau and demand an explanation, and he took a step to rush out. Cho Iran frowned, wanting to stop him, knowing he was throwing an egg at a stone, but she found no words to say. Just as his hand reached for the door, it slid open on its own to both sides. A cold, beautiful figure stood in the doorway. The eight fell silent at once, every gaze swinging to her, because the newcomer was Hyun. Her expression was calm, as if she did not see the furious youth at the threshold, and did not care about the several scrutinizing, curious, disdainful, or amused stares in the room. Her gaze swept over everyone indifferently and settled at last on the two second-grade peak geniuses. Choi ran and so ran, and I caught the flat verdict pass through her mind that these two had barely acceptable talent while the rest looked like trash. The eight of them lost themselves for a beat the moment they saw her face clearly, the same thought lighting in every head, that this girl was staggeringly beautiful. Then their attention slid to the monster on her shoulder, and the room froze. That mosquito was the size of an adult's palm, its body sheathed in a ferocious carapace of interwoven deep blue and dark red, a ring of domineering lion-like flame light burning around its head, the very edges of its wings flickering with eerie nether fire, its aura dangerous enough to make every heart in the room stutter. So Rand's mouth fell open wide enough to hold an egg as he pointed, aghast, and demanded whether that thing was a white-striped mosquito, and the others stared in the same disbelief, because whose white-striped mosquito looked like that? This was plainly a mosquito-type demonic beast none of them had ever seen. The pupils of the class's cold, arrogant second-grade mid-stage spiritual mentalist tightened as he read the beast's true strength first, judging its second-grade early stage, and everyone startled again. A second-grade early-stage beast tamer. Half the forum post overturned itself on the spot, exposed as rumor-mongering, because she was no first-grade mid-stage trash at all. But so what? They traded strange looks, because a contract beast at second-grade early stage at 18 was genuinely good talent, top tier in any ordinary class, and near the head of an elite class. Yet this was the hidden dragon class, whose floor was second-grade mid-stage, so what right had a second-grade early stage to sit here? She was not pure trash after all, only a well-connected person with decent talent, and connected was still connected. While they stewed, Hyun paid the tangle of stairs no mind, walked straight to an empty cold jade cushion, sat, and closed her eyes as if waiting for something. That composure and that coldness that dismissed everything left the favored children prickling with an inexplicable annoyance, wondering what right a backdoor girl had to put on such a lofty act in front of them. At that, Jin Jong, blunt and raw, could hold it no longer and strode over, his voice rasping but firm, asking what level her strength truly was. Hyun opened her eyes slowly, her cold gaze fixing on him, and spat back 3 words asking whether he was looking for trouble. His body stiffened, his cheeks flushing, but he squared his chest and insisted he meant no harm, that he only wanted to know whether she was qualified to sit here, whether she had earned the seat on her own strength or on her background. She looked at him calmly for 2 seconds, then closed her eyes again as if one more word would be a waste. I complained to myself from her shoulder that the guy did not seem to mean her ill, his head was just wired a little too straight. Blood rushed to Jin Jong's face at being so blatantly ignored, and he decided she was guilty, that she did not dare answer. And just as he was about to detonate, the cultivation room door slid open again, and Dean Joe walked in carrying a large storage box, all smiles apologizing for the wait, and setting the box down before her. The freshman resources the Federation and the school had readied, asking her to check them. She opened her eyes and casually opened the box, and at once a dense medicinal fragrance and a wash of spiritual energy filled the whole room. Inside, more than a dozen spirit herbs of various ages lay neatly ranked, every one at least 3rd grade, a few reaching 4th. The room hushed, expressions turning amused, because the combined value ran to at least 3 million, more than even Hidden Dragon students like them ever received at once. The special treatment far too blatant, and now every one of them was 100% convinced she was a connected girl with a background that reached the heavens. As for my compound eyes, they lit up like 2 little bulbs the second I saw those herbs, because it was all evolution points and this wave was pure profit. Facing millions in resources, Hyun's face stayed still as a quiet well, as though she were looking at a heap of common weeds. Ignoring every stare, she picked up a fourth-grade herb, the mind-concentrating flower, and sniffed it lightly, studying its properties. Now the room was fully speechless, since without a word of explanation, she had told them through her actions that yes, she was connected. And what of it? Too arrogant. A handsome youth beside So-ran curled his lips and teased that So-ran hated girls who acted cool like this the most, that she was overdoing it, asking whether he was going to go put her in her place. So-ran glanced at him, then turned his gaze back to Hyun, taking in that cold and lovely profile and that indifference that cared for nothing. And he chuckled and raised an eyebrow, saying who was acting cool, that a girl this good-looking was simply cold and elegant, that this was the cold and elegant school beauty style. And did the boy really not get it? The boy had nothing to say to that. The handsome youth was named Hwa Myung-hoon, of the Hwa family, a top-tier beast-taming clan of Dunan. The So family led Dunan's alchemy trade, and the Hwa family held half its beast-taming trade. The two clans close for generations. So-ran and Hwa Myung-hoon best friends since childhood, so there was nothing about the man's behavior Hwa Myung-hoon could not read. So-ran had two great hobbies in life. The first was using his family and his face to flirt with girls everywhere, the current school beauty of Dunan number 1 being just one of his countless exes. The second was frantically chasing girlfriends and breeding his contract beast. And Hwa Myung-hoon still remembered visiting the So family's beast-taming base and seeing that poor three-headed crimson flame lion ringed by 7 or 8 lionesses of different species. A tragedy for the whole lion kingdom. The worst for the fact that the lion was still a cub whose mane had not even come in. So the moment So-ran's gaze glued itself to Hyun, Hwa Myung-hoon knew the habits were flaring up again. Still, it was only human. This Hyun really was too beautiful, the school beauty of Dunan number 1, likely to look like a maidservant beside her. And though her talent fell short by hidden dragon standards, so what? Since to be airdropped into their class at this moment meant the power behind her was no small thing, no worse than the So and Hwa families. Background, appearance, all top tier, she danced right on So-ran's preferences. The room went subtle for a while. After the first shock and amusement wore off, the other favored children drifted toward boredom, all of them extraordinary in origin and arrogant to the bone, unable to raise any interest in befriending a backdoor girl, unwilling to flatter a country bumpkin who had changed her fate by being born well. Soon several of them, Cho-i-ran included, filtered out, judging it better to go practice than waste time here. Only the gold-rimmed boy who had first pushed to build a relationship lingered, hunting an opening to strike up a conversation, and only Jin Jong stayed rooted, fists clenched, expression shifting. He was furious and unwilling, but no fool. And from the dean's attitude and that box of priceless resources, he could tell her background was likely even more terrifying than he had imagined. That even if he made a scene with the principal or the bureau, nothing would come of it. He gave Hyun one long, deep look, then turned and left without a word. I lay on her shoulder watching it all, honestly surprised. That was it? The script was wrong. By any normal process, a few blind idiots should have leapt out to mock my empress, snarling that connection should get out, and that she did not deserve the seat, and then the empress would unfurl her overbearing aura, slap their faces, stun the room, and finally I, the king of pretense, would step out to finish the job and dominate the whole scene. How clean, how standard that would be. Instead, the hothead who looked most like cannon fodder had worked it out himself, and left, and the rest wore a could not be bothered look. Were the geniuses of a big place like Dunan all this reasonable? No, this was too abnormal, and I actually felt a little off balance about it. Fine, better no one bothered us. I quit chewing on it and turned my eyes to that box of spirit grass, compound eyes nearly glowing at the quality and luster, all of it evolution points. I rubbed my forelimbs, unable to hold back and wondering whether to tell the empress, then deciding not to bother her while she studied that broken flower. Besides, these resources were for us, and as her contract beast, surely it was only natural I'd take the lion's share. Perfect excuse. With a flutter, I flew over the box, aimed at one of the plainest looking little red flowers, and drove my hideous proboscis deep into it. Hyun, studying the mind-concentrating flower, heard the movement and glanced over, and when she saw me perched on a third-grade herb, the crimson sunflower, sucking away, she paused a half-second before pulling her eyes back. She was used to it, since a guy who could drain a spirit-nurturing crystal could obviously drink herb juice, and there were plenty here, so if I wanted a few mouthfuls, fine.